Our protagonist is Hiragi Duya, a 24-year-old and an exceptionally talented stage actor. His career is on the rise, with his beautiful girlfriend Midori by his side and the full support of Kiryu Masato, a student of his mother. Hiragi Duya's life was supposed to pass peacefully until he landed a role in the play The Phantom of the Opera. Haunted by the role, he almost harmed his lover, but thankfully his reason pulled him back in time. However, true tragedy strikes and completely changes his life when Duya brutally attacks two thugs while disguised to find inspiration for his role. Overwhelmed by guilt, he wants to turn himself in, but Masato, his ever-present manager, advises him to stay silent until the play ends and promises to handle everything. Duya hesitates at first, but is then persuaded by Masato, who uses his mother's life and his own to convince him, making him soften and agree with the thought of confessing after the play's run. The turning point that transforms him into a true murderer is when he becomes suspicious and plans to murder Sakuragi. Is Hiragi Duya a sick murderer or just a pitiful actor obsessed with his role? I hope you'll follow the story to find out the answer. The frame opens on a young man's back, a knife brandished in his hand while strawberry syrup splatters everywhere. His face is splattered with the red liquid, his eyes wide and lifeless, yet a crazed smile plays on his lips. He tells himself, if I had turned back then, this wouldn't have happened. With no emotion showing on his face, he frantically swings the knife repeatedly while his thoughts continue. It's hard, isn't it? For you too, huh? He grips the knife handle with both hands, then stabs down with great force. The force of the stab sends the crimson liquid flying, and he continues to mutter to himself, me too. This young man's image appears on the show Explaining the News You're Curious About at 8:30 in the morning with the hot topic, why is this actor so famous? Along with the headline, a performance full of power. The voice of a young girl, Inohara 10, rings out excitedly when she sees her idol on TV. He's so cool, with her big round eyes sparkling with admiration. 11-year-old Inohara 10 turns to her father and says, I want to meet Hiragi-kun in real life. The man named Jinda Kuki, 32 years old, smiles gently and says to the little girl, Ten-chan, you've really been into him lately, huh? Hearing Jinda's question, Inohara eagerly turns and replies, because he's amazing, so incredibly cool. His aura is completely different from normal people. Jinda maintains a fond expression looking at his precious daughter and asks again, an aura, huh? The little girl raises her hands to her adorable chubby cheeks, squeezing her eyes shut with an adoring expression as she tells Jinda, he just starred in a TV drama and a movie, and he does plays too. I want to go see one sometime. But before she can finish her sentence, someone cuts her off. Hey, 10. A man with sharp features gestures for the girl to quiet down. Your voice is getting loud. This man is Inohara Tatsumi, 32 years old, and Inohara's father. He reminds his daughter, we have to be quiet in the hospital, remember? Realizing she was being noisy, Inohara quickly covers her mouth, whispering an apology. Oh, I'm sorry. Afterwards, Tatsumi approaches and pats his daughter's head, then turns to greet Jinda. Hello, Jinda-san. Are you here for a visit? Seeing Tatsumi, Jinda also replies cheerfully. Yeah? Hello to you too. Tatsumi expresses his thanks. Thank you for visiting 10 so often. Jinda maintains a friendly demeanor. He smiles and replies, It's nothing. I should be the one thanking you. When he glances at the watch on his wrist, Jinda suddenly exclaims, sorry, I have to get back to work. Tatsumi comforts him. You've been working hard. The little girl Inohara cheerfully encourages him. Do your best, mister. Jinda leaves but doesn't forget to turn back and wave goodbye to the father and daughter. Outside, a white car is already parked and waiting for him, while Kiryu Masato is putting things away. He sees Jinda approach and gently tap on the car window. Kiryu Masato, 29 years old, reaches over to open the door and asks Jinda, Welcome back. How's your mother? Jinda gets into the car, closes the door, and while adjusting his glasses says with a smile to Masato, Same as always. Once settled in the car, he takes off his glasses, wearily tossing them into the back seat and says dejectedly, "I was stuck listening to hospital gossip the whole time." He raises his handsome face, reaching up to adjust his tie. As it turns out, Jindakuki is the actor Hiragi Duya who was just on the news in the hospital. Duya then turns to ask Masato, "By the way, I even got to hear a fan's voice in person." Masato, still focused on driving, asks in surprise, "A fan?" Remembering the little girl in Ohara, Duya says, "Ah, it was the kid in the next room." He replies while engrossed in a book, "Yeah, that kid always comes to visit her mom." Closing the book, Duya chuckles with delight remembering the little girl's expression. He recounts, "She was watching a recording of me on TV and said, 'I want to meet him in person.'" Masato also smiles and replies, "Makes you want to say, 'I'm standing right in front of you,' huh?" Thinking about it, Duya hugs the book, unable to hide his amused smile. Masato, who is driving, also smiles foolishly when imagining the scene. Suddenly, Masato's voice turns serious as he warns, "Don't you dare slip up." Duya understands and replies, "I can't do that, can I?" At this, Duya bows his head, saying sadly, "I have to become someone that kid can cheer for without any worries." Hearing this, Masato asks, "Are you still bothered by it? By what happened the other day?" The scene shifts to a dark room, with clothes strewn messily on the floor. Duya is sitting alone on the bed, intently reading the script for The Phantom of the Opera. An image of a castle appears in the middle of the night, which is the setting of the opera house in 19th century Paris. A portrait of Christine appears in the darkness. It is rumored that a ghost residing there nurtured her singing voice. Under the stage lights, the image of Christine dancing with her co-star appears, falling rose petals making the dance even more captivating. But then, the image of the phantom becomes terrifying. His body splattered with dark red stains. He clutches his chest with one hand, the other holding a sharp weapon still covered in red fluid. It is said he killed those who stood in his way for a love and hatred that swirled deep within this classic masterpiece. Akamatsu Midori, 25 years old, lying in bed, asks Duya, "Hey, not sleeping yet? You have to get up early tomorrow, right?" Duya hunches over and replies, "Midori, you can go to sleep first. I still have some things to do." Midori raises her hand, her voice full of confidence. "I've already memorized my lines, so that's enough." Then she consoles Duya, "Relax a little, genius actor." Duya looks at his own hands, his voice filled with anxiety. "My role? I still don't completely understand the Phantom Eric, a person who can kill even strangers he's never spoken to." As soon as he finishes speaking, he whirls around with an annoyed expression to see Midori already snoring. Though just a moment ago she was whispering intimately, he lets out a dejected sentence, and she can still sleep soundly. Utterly helpless, Duya rubs the back of his neck, sighing, "I'm so jealous." But then his orange-hued eyes suddenly turn sorrowful, as if holding countless chaotic emotions. Looking at the script in his hand, his expression becomes even more melancholic. He thinks to himself, in the script, the Phantom. Eric kills the backstage manager. The reason is when there was a backstage accident, that person blamed it all on the Phantom. The mask hovers in his mind along with his questions. Killing someone just for that? It sounds so unreasonable. That backstage person probably didn't even know the Phantom existed. Thinking this far, Duya suddenly freezes. He tells himself, no, it's possible. He clutches his chest, writhing as he remembers his own grievances, being yelled at, being blamed by someone who doesn't even know me, who has never once seen me. If that's what I've always had to endure, then. His arm reaches forward as if to grasp something. Selfish, you don't know anything. Upon touching the mask, Duya's face shows extreme bewilderment. Meaningless words from others still echo in his head. You don't know anything. Relax. Genius actor. Duya puts on the mask, seemingly having understood something. He says to himself, you don't know anything either. Now, Duya stands facing Midori, who is fast asleep on the bed. He remains motionless for a long time. Then suddenly, he raises both hands, tightly gripping Midori's neck while she is still sound asleep. Suddenly, Duya snaps out of it. His face shows clear horror, sweat pouring down like he's been bathed. He screams in his own madness, "Me, Midori, I... just now," but looking closely. The girl is still sleeping soundly, as if the sky could fall without her noticing, leaving Duya speechless. She's asleep, or maybe back in the present. Their car is still speeding down the road. Recalling that incident, Masato confirms with Duya, "Definitely. You're the type of actor who gets too into character." Thinking of the mask from the play, Duya falls into a thoughtful silence. Masato continues, "It's like your soul was possessed by the role. But Midori-san is fine. You managed to control yourself, right?" Duya sadly replies, "Yeah, that's right." Masato asks again. "She was asleep. She's a very deep sleeper, right?" Duya raises a hand to stop him. Yeah, okay. Seeing this, Masato says, "Anyway, more importantly, if the media finds out about your relationship with Midori-san, it will be a huge problem. So you need to be careful, seriously." Hearing this, Duya can only manage a wry smile. A few days later, at the theater, everyone is busy cleaning up after a rehearsal. Someone says loudly, "Thank you for your hard work." Masato walks behind, praising Duya. "Great work. This time, it was like a real performance, not just a rehearsal." Hearing this, Duya laughs and thanks him. "Ah ha ha, thanks. Just like a genius actor, huh?" Hearing the word genius, Masato suddenly becomes thoughtful. "Genius, huh?" Then Masato steps forward, opening the door for Duya and saying, "If you don't have any plans after this, I'm heading home to rest." Duya squints and replies, "No, I'm going to stay a little longer after a short break." Masato requests, "No, you need to rest properly." Duya immediately refuses. "I can't, I still don't feel right." Entering the dressing room, Duya sits down on a chair, saying as he takes off his shirt, "I'm going to take a little walk." He takes off his shirt, revealing a firm six-pack as he tells Masato, Jinda style. Masato looks at Duya with a helpless expression, but gives in. "Disguised and taking a walk to clear your head." A while later, Duya in the guise of Jinda is strolling down the street. He remembers Masato's words, "I'll go back to the office first. But you be careful." Duya raises his hand, thinking to himself, "When I choked Midori, I felt like I understood Eric. But something's still not right." Walking down the street, Duya suddenly stops and looks into a dark, deserted alley. A question flashes through his mind. Did the phantom Eric ever walk down a dark path like this? Without much thought, Duya turns and enters the alley, thinking as he walks, "No, if he lived underground, it must have been even darker, right?" His footsteps suddenly stop when a voice calls out from behind, "Hey bro." Duya turns around to see two rough-looking young men blocking his path. He asks, "Is there a problem?" The brown-haired guy says with a sly grin to Duya, "This road has a toll, you know." The one in the beanie next to him chimes in, "That's right. You gotta pay up." Duya replies in a panic, "No, this is a public road." Seeing this, the brown-haired guy puts an arm around his shoulder, using a condescending tone. "You're a grown-up, right? Let's follow the rules of the road, okay?" The guy in the green beanie also chimes in threateningly. "You want to get home safe without getting hurt, don't you? What's wrong with that?" Hearing these words and being touched, Duya yells, "Let go," as soon as he finishes. The guy in the green beanie gifts him with a heavy punch and shouts, "Shut your mouth." The brown-haired guy next to him puts on a very fake expression. Oh dear, grown-ups who can't stay calm are so terrible. With that, the guy drags Duya by the neck into an abandoned building, threatening, "All right, time for a lesson." Despite this, only one thought fills his mind. The Phantom of the Opera has been adapted many times to this day. Another swift kick to his body jolts Duya back to reality. He wonders, what's with these guys? At this point, Duya can only curl up and take the hits, but still can't escape his train of thought. The origin of the main character, the Phantom Eric, changes with each version. Seeing the two guys dancing around mockingly in front of him, he dimly understands. They're hitting me partly for fun, partly as a joke. Duya's hand fumbles behind him and unexpectedly touches a crowbar. His mind still echoes, but no matter the version. Eric's crimes all have one thing in common. Duya's eyes widen as he gets a firm grip on what he was looking for. His subconscious still resounds, treating him like a selfish child who knows nothing at all. Everything starts to crumble and then becomes stained red by rash and brutal words. A long while later, a voice is heard. "Kiryu-san?" It turns out to be Duya calling Masato, with his crimson-stained hands holding the phone. Duya says, I want to apologize." Behind him, the two thugs lie motionless in extremely painful positions. As for Duya, he is completely transformed, his face and body covered in blood. He calmly informs Masato with a chillingly placid tone, "I've become a murderer." Much later, Masato arrives at the scene. He lowers his voice as if to confirm everything. In other words, they started it, right? Masato stands with his back to Duya, reassuring him Duya-kun did nothing wrong. It was self-defense. Duya is now terrified, his ketchup-covered hands clutching his dazed face. He says, "That was excessive self-defense. Anyone can see that." He hangs his head in guilt, repeatedly apologizing. "Masato-san, I'm sorry, even though you always supported me. Masato approaches, reaching out a hand as if to ask, "Will you be okay from now on?" But he suddenly stops, because Duya has stood up and cut him off, his voice firm. "There is no from now on. I'm going to call the police." But Duya suddenly remembers his first meeting with Masato and the words he had said. "I'd be happy if you could stay with me for a little longer." Masato's gaze becomes incredibly determined. He says as if giving an order, "Let's get out of here." Glancing around, Masato assesses the situation. It looks like construction here has been halted, and you have nothing to do with these bodies. Looking at the two corpses on the ground, Masato makes a proposal to Duya. "If we keep quiet, no one will suspect a thing. Even if the bodies are found, you won't be a suspect." Rejecting Masato's proposal, Duya firmly holds his ground. "Turning myself in is the right thing to do." Masato still tries to persuade him. "That's not necessary." "You're not a bad person," Duya shouts. "No, I am a bad person." He remembers what he almost did to Midori and tells Masato, "There's something wrong with me. I'm really not myself anymore." His eyes fill with despair. Duya hangs his head, crying out in pain, "Even though I killed someone." Duya's hands clutch his small, trembling body, sinking deeper into extreme fear. He looks down at his own stained hands, uttering terrifying words. "Right after I killed them, I felt amazing, like I was liberated." Hearing these words, Masato calmly asks, "What about your mother? What about Shizuko-san?" Thinking of the woman fighting her illness in solitude, he continues to press, "The surgery costs, the treatment costs, your life is now Shizuko-san's life." Duya dazedly bows his head upon hearing Masato's words. He whispers, "That's..." Without giving Duya time to hesitate, Masato relentlessly continues, "So you can just throw away your acting career after coming this far with blood and tears?" At this, Duya helplessly puts his hand inside his jacket, closes his eyes tightly and gently expresses his thoughts. "That would be a shame. That I can't play Eric. I think I finally understand him." His trembling hands hold the phone forward, his voice breaking. But still, hearing this, Masato grabs Duya's hand, shouting as if to rally his spirits, "Then let's go perform. You should play him." Duya's face shows pure shock. He still can't process what Masato just said, only managing to utter, "Eh?" Masato snatches the phone from Duya's hand, saying as he runs, "If we've decided, we have to hurry back to the stage. I'll take care of the rest." Duya frantically runs after him, shouting, "Hey, wait!" Before he can finish, Masato has jumped into the car, slammed the door shut, and started the engine, leaving a bewildered Duya screaming outside. This is not okay. After starting the car, Masato gets out and asks Duya, "Not okay? Why? You have to be honest with your feelings." He takes off his outer jacket and orders Duya, "Please move aside. I'm going to move the bodies. Meanwhile, Duya is in a complete panic, shouting, "Are you listening to me?" Ignoring his words. Masato proceeds to move the two bodies. He tells Duya, "Just once, the Phantom of the Opera. Just perform it on stage once. Then we'll decide what to do next. Until then, we'll hide these bodies." Seeing the other man ignore him, Duya tries to shout even louder as if to stop Masato. And Masato-san, you too. Masato is also aware that by helping Duya, he too will be implicated, but he remains resolute. "Yeah? I can't avoid being charged as an accomplice. So what?" After putting the bodies in the trunk, Masato continues to persuade him. "The most important thing is to make sure nothing looks suspicious. Duya-kun, you plan to continue practicing, so just stick to that plan. I'll be back at the theater, got it? For Shizuko-san's life, for the stage, don't give up, don't." A long time later, Duya, in his Jinda disguise, returns to the theater. He stands at the door, his heart heavy with thoughts. I gave in to Masato-san's determination. Sitting in the quiet, empty theater, Duya's heart is filled with a mess of emotions. He thinks to himself, I absolutely cannot drag Masato-san into this. Even now, I can still go to the police station. He fumbles in his coat pocket and realizes his phone is gone. Duya lets out an ah and then remembers. That's right. My phone, Masato-san took it. While taking off his coat and hurrying up the stairs, Duya makes a decision. I'll borrow a phone here. Even so, what worries me more than the murder is Masato-san. Upon entering the room, Duya is startled to hear someone call out, "Ah, Hiragi-san." Duya breaks into a cold sweat, thinking to himself, I was panicking too much. The young man, upon seeing Duya, continues, "Thank you for your hard work. Practicing again?" Holding a bunch of props in his arms, he approaches Duya, saying warmly, "I really admire your passion." Duya forces a smile and replies, "I'm just too sensitive. I feel like I'm not doing anything right, really talking too much." The young crew member holds up a roll of tape and says, "Everyone says that. Hiragi-san is on another level even during practice." "Ah, if you don't mind, could I help you out a bit? I'm in charge of lighting. I'll set up the lights for you." Duya asks in surprise, "Really? Honestly, that would be a great help." Then he silently laments, "I'm such an idiot." A while later, standing alone on the stage, Duya thinks to himself, in the end, I came back here. Then he returns to his practice and calls out, "Sorry, I'll try not to take too long." The young man replies, No, take your time. You can stay even longer." As he looks down at the empty audience seats, Duya with a sorrowful face thinks with a sigh, This is the last time, just a little bit. If it's just for a little bit." After that, Duya loses himself in the play. He passionately sings each melody, as if this would be his last time on this stage. The memory of the two pained, contorted faces he murdered flashes by, but Duya remains engrossed in his own frenzied performance. The crew member adjusting the lights from behind is also wide-eyed with astonishment at Duya's divine performance, unable to utter a word. In his eyes now, there is only the image of Duya tirelessly practicing. Everything seems to freeze, and in those same eyes, he seems to see the figure of a real Eric, no longer Duya. He can imagine the scene of how Eric mercilessly dealt with an unfortunate victim. And on the stage, Duya has truly become one with the character, as if he himself is the soul of this play. When he finishes, Duya stands up, his face drenched in sweat. He lets out a long breath, tilting his face to the ceiling in exhaustion. From the upper seats, the crew member continuously applauds Duya's practice session. It's clear on his face now is a look of absolute admiration, so much so that he can't close his mouth from the performance he just witnessed, directing his tired eyes in that direction. Duya can see the figure of Masato clapping in praise for him. Duya bows in a thank you gesture, like a true actor. "Thank you very much." At the same time, Masato steps out from the wings and calls out, "Duya-kun." Seeing Masato, Duya stammers in surprise. "Masato-san? When did you—" Masato cuts him off, getting straight to the point. Let's call it a day." Then he hesitates. "Because of your mother." In the seats above, the crew member squints and says, "Thank you. Thank you for your hard work." A while later in the break room, Masato tells Duya, "I just got a call from the hospital. The surgery might be scheduled, but we'll have to wait at least 6 more months." Hearing this, Duya is a bit saddened, hesitantly replying, "I see. But the surgery costs are still—" Not letting Duya finish, Masato cuts in, reassuring him, "I'll request an advance from the company president. For a rising star like you, it's almost certain to be approved." Despite this, Duya is still confused. "But then Masato begins to recount. "And there's one more thing. The police were at that construction site." As he places a cup in the coffee machine, he continues, "I was going to clean up the blood, but someone might have reported it because I was making noise." Duya asks worriedly. So, pouring coffee from the pot into a cup, Masato answers definitively, "That's right. Let's assume hiding the murder is no longer feasible, but we will go on stage." With a gentle but firm expression, Masato offers the coffee cup to Duya and says, "Not just once, but many times." Still unable to believe everything, Duya brings the coffee cup to his lips, saying, "No, I can't. We live in a world full of surveillance cameras. And didn't we say just once?" Hearing Duya say this, Masato simply replies, "It's fate." Duya, confused, just lets out a "huh?" Masato's gaze suddenly turns serious. He says coldly, "The fact that the doctor has such a long waiting list to be available, that is fate. Let's work hard to save money before the surgery. Otherwise, your mother will die." Although he knows what Masato says is true, Duya's heart is still hesitant due to too many conflicting emotions. He hesitates to speak, but not letting Duya finish his sentence, Masato interrupts, "I will die too." Hearing the words Masato just uttered, Duya's eyes widen in astonishment. He stammers, asking again, "What did you just say?" Masato asks again, "You didn't hear me?" Then he tilts his head back, running his index finger across his neck in a suicide gesture. With a resolute expression, Masato threatens Duya, "If you confess, Duya-kun, I will end my own life." With a blazing fire of determination, Masato steps closer, speaking in a dangerous tone that makes Duya break out in a cold sweat. "This wasn't a joke or a drunken murder, right? Even the people around you don't know, right?" Then he flashes a darkly suggestive smile and continues, "Don't worry, when we get caught, we'll go together." The image of a prestigious pair of silver handcuffs appears in Duya's mind, accompanied by Masato's enticing words, "Until then, we will fight." He casts a suspicious glance at Masato, who is still trying his best to persuade him. "Besides, you want to play that role, don't you? Eric the Phantom?" Remembering the crew member's expression from earlier, Duya's eyes momentarily sadden. Masato sits down, resting his chin on his hand in thought, and says, "That practice earlier, you did great, didn't you? That staff member too. If he can't see Hiragi Duya perform anymore, he'll be sad." Duya grabs the towel and drapes it over his shoulder, looking at Masato and calling out, "Masato-san?" Masato, hearing him, meekly apologizes. "Sorry about that, but please understand me. The dreams of many people rest on your shoulders." Even though what Masato says is true, Duya is still hesitant, even so, but seeing him hesitate again, Masato continues to plead, "Please, think it over carefully." Then he says loudly and emphatically, "Between all the effort you've put in and those foolish morals, which is more important?" Hearing this, Duya bows his head, repeating Masato's words. "More important?" Involuntarily, Duya remembers Masato's expression when he first saw him act. That was amazing. Duya-kun is truly amazing. Sitting across from Duya, Masato reassures him, "Let me handle the bodies. Our goal isn't a perfect crime. just keeping this deception going for as long as possible. In that case, there will be a way. Duya's reflection in the mirror is bowing its head in hesitation. If I confess, Masato-san, Masato remains confident in his plan and tells Duya, I've already said it. Suddenly, Duya speaks up. All right. Then he slowly raises his face. Standing opposite Masato, Duya, with eyes full of determination, says, I understand. Scene change to the next morning. On the highway, 2 male bodies surrounded by a flock of crows are discovered, and the police are quickly notified. Flowers are inserted into the eye sockets and mouths of the 2 victims. This incident, later known as the Hanaya case. No one knew that this was the beginning of a serial murder case, not even the perpetrators themselves. A while later, Tatsumi has also arrived at the scene. He receives a call from his daughter. Daddy is a little sleepy. Around them, many curious onlookers have gathered to film. Tatsumi, while greeting another police officer, reminds his daughter over the phone, That's right, be sure to listen to your aunt. He lifts the police tape, ducking under it, and says to his daughter, Okay, Daddy's a bit sleepy, but I have to keep going. Parting the curtain to enter the examination area, he continues, so that everyone can live in peace. So then, standing before the 2 bodies, surrounded by his working colleagues, Tatsumi begins to speculate. Identities unknown, abandoned in the middle of the night. Both have had their eyes gouged out. Are these flowers a memorial? The perpetrator could be a lunatic. Looking at the phone in his hand, he ponders. Abnormal, huh? It's certainly brutal. But the lack of clarity makes Tatsumi's facial expression show clear puzzlement. A lunatic? Because it's too cruel? Tatsumi speculates that there are still many suspicious points behind this crime. It feels like there's some kind of calculation behind it. Flashing back to 11 years ago. Mrs. Jinda, Duya's mother, approaches to greet Masato. Kiryu-kun, long time no see. Seeing a familiar face, Masato also politely greets her back. Jinda-san, it's been a while. She gets closer to Masato and says, Perfect timing. Could you watch Duya for me? Afterwards. She turns to leave but doesn't forget to thank him. I need to speak with the CEO. Thank you so much. Before Masato can even understand what's happening, she has already left, leaving him stunned for a moment before calling after her. Huh? Wait. Seeing this, Mrs. Jinda calls back. Sorry for being in such a rush. This is my son, Duya. Seeing this, Masato no longer refuses. He stands up, extends a hand and says, Oh, no, it's all right. Don't worry. Then he begins to introduce himself to Duya. I'm Kiryu Masato. Jinda-san? I'm a student of your mother's. Duya, holding a comic book on his lap, nonchalantly replies, I know. Noticing Duya's comic book, Masato asks in surprise, Is that a manga? Seeing the other's interest, Duya also introduces it. I found it at a used bookstore. I remember watching it a long time ago. Masato peered closer at the manga and exclaimed, Damn! Duya sees the chance to boast to his new acquaintance. Oh, right. They made an anime too. I've watched the final boss battle many times. Hearing this, Masato became extremely interested. His excitement was clear despite his thick glasses. Without a wasted motion, the man jumped up and started flailing about. He even recited a line from the manga. I will cast everything aside if it means destroying evil. Opposite him, young Duya joined in with gusto. He began waving his arms and legs while shouting, Then cast aside your own life. Tengetsu, oh, the evil man will destroy sin. Witnessing little Duya's equal fervor, Masato's eyes widened in surprise. With a slightly awkward yet joyful expression, Masato delved deeper into the roleplay. I thought the evil was standing right in front of me, but back in harsh reality, Masato's face was now weary, his eyes dazed as he forced himself to work. He gripped the steering wheel and lamented, and now, that garbage is the evil, no conscience needed. Seeing his friend's fatigue, Duya called out, Masato-san. Masato's tired eyes stayed on the road. but he kept talking nonstop. Hiding it last night makes the police look for someone with a deep grudge, a psycho or a victim. Then he suddenly yelled out, disrupting the initial investigation. That's the key to a perfect escape. Seeing his friend so unhinged, Duya suggested, "Hey, I'll drive. You didn't sleep at all last night, did you?" As if he didn't hear Duya, Masato continued to rant frantically about his plans to mislead the police. "I burned the clothes and belongings, then put the old disguise back on Duya. This will mess with identity checks and witness questioning." Seeing Masato was still raving despite being called, Duya said dejectedly, "I just thought of something. Can't they identify them by teeth or fingerprints?" At this, both of them fell silent. It was as if they were thinking, "Wait a minute, I don't think we thought of that." But the silence didn't last long, as Masato shouted again, "I used a road with no security cameras to dump the bodies." Sitting next to him, Duya was at his wit's end with this guy. He could only think to himself, "This eye-gouging thing is really serious." Dripping with sweat and with dark circles from lack of sleep, Masato continued, "If necessary, I'll bring the gouged out eyes myself." Hearing this, Duya couldn't take it anymore and protested, "That's not happening." Then the two men fell silent again. Only the decorative turtle dangling in the car continued to sway endlessly. A while later, when they arrived, Masato hit the brakes to stop the car and said, "We're here." He leaned over and told Duya, "I'm going back to the office. Duya-kun, just focus on rehearsal as usual." The wind gently rustled Duya's hair, and he wondered, "Masato-san, why are you doing all of this for me?" Sitting in the car, Masato calmly replied, as if it were obvious, "Because you will become a legendary actor in history." As he drove away, he called back, just like always. Left alone, Duya thought to himself, murder is clearly evil. And, stepping inside, Duya sighed as he looked at the clock, then lamented. Still, 2 hours until practice. Walking upstairs, he thought again about the bodies. It makes sense with what just happened, looking at his phone screen. Duya couldn't help but worry. If the car is discovered by chance, nothing about it will be suspicious. Seeing the headline about the discovery of 2 male bodies, Duya thought to himself. He dumped the bodies somewhere nearby. Masato-san said to leave the body disposal to him, but thinking of Masato's dazed face, his lifeless and bloodshot eyes, Duya wondered, is he going to be okay? He reached into his pocket for his pair of thick glasses. Duya put on the glasses, and instantly, he seemed to transform into a completely different person. The Phantom of the Opera. Beneath the stage is a hidden space, moving through buildings. Duya, in his Jinda persona, moved like a ninja. He thought as he moved. The main character, Eric Phantom, moved skillfully through the theater's secret passages and hidden rooms. Looking down from above, Duya confirmed his thoughts, his spatial awareness. This is one of Eric Phantom's signature skills. This is the closest I can get, not being on the theater's roof. Approaching the theater door, Duya thought, I can't see the investigation's progress from here. Still, I've figured some things out. Resting his chin on his hand, Duya began to deduce like a professional detective. The secret passages and basements Eric used wouldn't be obvious at first glance. In other words, they'd be blind spots to the naked eye, probably high or narrow spaces like the path I just took. I need to be careful not to be seen. Pushing up his thick glasses with his index finger, Duya reasoned. This means even moving through them requires caution, is not practical for frequent use. After adjusting his glasses, he stroked his chin again, his face showing frustration as he couldn't quite grasp his thought. Naturally, his core strength must be very solid. Every movement must be precise. Suddenly, Tatsumi's voice cut through Duya's thoughts. Excuse me. Can I? Duya replied in surprise. Yes? Seeing a familiar face, Tatsumi asked directly, Are you involved with this building? Jinda-san? Realizing he'd been discovered, Duya became flustered, sweat pouring down like rain. Then he remembered this was an acquaintance and quickly greeted him. You're Tenchan's father. right? Or, seeing Duya recognize him, Tatsumi also raised a hand in greeting. Hey, thanks for always being good to my daughter. Not one to beat around the bush. Tatsumi directly showed his badge. He asked Duya, So, what are you doing here? Seeing the police badge, Duya flinched, thinking to himself, a cop? Her dad is a cop. Seeing his reaction, Tatsumi got straight to the point. Actually, I'm patrolling around here for a different reason. Duya was sweating bullets, stammering his reply. Actually, while his mind raced. Crap. I can't say I was worried about the body I just dumped. At this point, Duya decided to play his hand. He bowed his head, took off his glasses, and said, I'm sorry, I'm just a curious onlooker. This statement confused Tatsumi. An onlooker? Fixing his hair to look the part, Duya revealed his true identity. I'm an actor. My name is Hiragi Duya. Hearing him reveal his real name, Tatsumi was startled and backed against the wall, stammering. Hiragi, my daughter talks about you all the time. Really, a celebrity. Duya put his hands behind his back, bowed at a 45-degree angle, and respectfully explained, being suspected or arrested for trespassing would be bad. Yes, I'm actually about to play a murderer. Following that, he started planning how to handle Tatsumi. He's an expert. Lying would be counterproductive. Then Duya told Tatsumi, I heard there was an incident nearby. I thought I might find something useful for my role. Tatsumi composed himself and approached to question Duya. In other words, you entered without permission? Duya acted deeply, bowing his head and starting to play the repentant role. I'm sorry. The two fell into silence while Tatsumi was scrutinizing him. Duya maintained his remorseful expression. After a moment, Tatsumi sighed and rubbed his head. All right, just this once. 'Cause you've been nice to my daughter, waiting for this. Duya bowed politely again. Yes, I won't do it again. But suddenly, he became curious. By the way, what kind of person is the culprit? Seeing Duya's interest in the case, Tatsumi answered seriously, I can't comment on the investigation. Duya thought to himself, damn it! But then he scratched his head, trying to ask again. You can't? Tatsumi replied coldly. I can't. Unexpectedly, Tatsumi revealed a little information, but what kind of person is the culprit? Right, naive and lonely. Hearing this, Duya was surprised, let out a huh, and thought to himself, the Phantom of the Opera. What makes this story so compelling? Tatsumi continued to muse about the culprit. It's just my impression, but someone with no one to share their worries or troubles with, who can't grasp social distance from others, so they sometimes overreact to people. It feels something like that. Duya was stunned by these words, his mind still lost in thought, abandoned by his mother for his ugly face. Phantom, Eric was saved from loneliness. So that's what they call character analysis? It must be because this story is about love. Tatsumi scratched his head and continued, No, I've seen a lot of cases, so it's more like a gut feeling. While Tatsumi was lost in his analysis, Duya had reached a conclusion. This person is a danger. Looking at the man who was both familiar and strange, Duya confirmed one thing. This man can see through the truth. Thinking of Masato's exaggeratedly resolute expression, Duya blamed himself. I'm such an idiot. Why did this happen? The ghost of Eric seemed to haunt his mind. Duya clutched his face in pain, questioning himself. Why is it so troublesome? Why won't you leave me alone when you know nothing about me? You idiot, even though you hate me. Noticing his strange behavior, Tatsumi grabbed Duya's shoulders, calling out loudly, Jinda-san, no. Hiragi-san, what's wrong? Shaken hard. He suddenly came to his senses and quickly stammered an apology. Sorry, I was overthinking. Just thinking about what kind of person would be naive and lonely. Hearing this, Tatsumi rubbed his chin, looking thoughtful. So I was right. You're using it for your role, aren't you? Suddenly, a phone rang. Duya was surprised. My phone. Then he quickly turned to leave. But not without turning back. to ask Tatsumi for permission. Sorry, I'll just step out for a moment seeing this. Tatsumi also replied cheerfully, Go ahead. Seeing the name Masato on the screen, Duya thought to himself, From Masato-san, my savior. He quickly answered the phone. Hello? As soon as the call connected, Masato on the other end urgently announced, Bad news? Duya's expression darkened with displeasure as he heard Masato say, Someone is starting to suspect us. Turning to leave, Duya's expression now looked no different from a murderer's as he heard Masato continue, There's no other way but to kill them. Masato's cruel suggestion made Duya's expression instantly turn cold and emotionless. He glanced back at Tatsumi, his heart full of worry, and replied to the phone, What do you mean there's no other way? Suddenly, he turned and spoke loudly to Tatsumi. Sorry, seems like there's a problem at work. Seeing this, Tatsumi waved his hand. I understand, but you can't keep sneaking in like this. Without waiting for Tatsumi to finish, Duya leaped out the window. Yes, sir. Well then. He left Tatsumi behind, completely baffled, with a giant question mark over his head. An actor or a ninja? Meanwhile, Duya rushed off while speaking into the phone. You just said there's no choice but to kill them. Who? Why? On the other end, Masato replied coldly. If I acted alone, you would get angry. That's why I'm telling you. But if necessary, I'll do it myself. Duya shouted into the phone. I slept almost twice as much as you today. If someone has to decide, it's me. Tell me. According to Masato's story, I'm keeping an eye on someone. She's always busy. While looking at Sakuragi, Masato spoke into the phone. Yes, that's right. 3 more months. Meanwhile, Sakuragi thought to herself, he seems especially tired today. Suddenly, 2 female colleagues called her, Sakuragi-san. Are you free for lunch? Hearing someone call her, Sakuragi quickly replied, Ah, yes. Sakuragi left but couldn't help but notice the busy Masato. Kiryu-san is in charge of Hiragi Duya, a talented actor our company is heavily promoting. Even while eating and chatting with everyone, she only thought of Masato. Hiragi-san is very lively, friendly, and very popular within the company. During the meal, someone suddenly said, Oh, right. Have you heard about the recent incident? Ah, that case. The victim's eyes were gouged out, but Sakuragi was still lost in thoughts about Masato. Compared to Hiragi-san, the other girls continued to chatter away. That is just too gruesome. I think I'll have to ask my parents to pick me up. The girl next to her immediately bragged. My boyfriend drives me to and from work every day. The black-haired girl sitting opposite irritably snapped. What the heck? You guys. No matter what anyone said, Sakuragi only thought of Masato, Kiryu-san's gentle aura as he quietly supports him. When everyone finished eating and left, the black-haired girl clutched her head and sighed. I want a boyfriend too, the brown-haired girl teased. You have to be bold. You have to make the first move. The 3 girls left, still chattering excitedly. That's the secret. Sakuragi watched them, thinking to herself, bold? The first move? After some deliberation, she confidently decided, by myself, proactively. Masato was still hard at work, even humming a few lines from some singer that day. I acted a little strange. Sakuragi returned to her desk, thinking to herself, normally, I would never do something like this. Then before I knew it, all of a sudden, she stood behind Masato and shouted, Kikiryu-san, startling Masato so much he nearly jumped out of his skin. He turned around, sweating, and asked, Sakuragi-san, what is it? She stammered, trying to force out each word. Then she offered to Masato, I want to give you a hand. Masato asked again in surprise. Help me? Sakuragi was now blushing crimson, trying to muster all the confidence her parents gave her to tell him, You look really busy today, and you don't look so well either. Hearing her words, Masato rubbed his head and replied, I'm fine. Really? Physically? I'm okay? Remembering Masato's rushed appearance last night, she told him, But last night, you came back to the office and then went out again. You look so tired, she confessed to him gently. If there's anything I can do to help, even just a little, then Hearing this, Masato moved closer to Sakuragi and said, "Maybe I'll take you up on that." Seeing Masato wanted her help, she blushed and replied, "Of course." The scene then shows both of them busy with work, with Sakuragi's thoughts running. The value of Hiragi Duya. We have gathered objective data about him. After a while, Masato held up a piece of paper and said, "Looks like we'll need to present this to quite a few people." While working, Sakuragi wondered aloud. Speaking of which, the play by... Hearing the play mentioned, Masato asked, "The Phantom of the Opera, right?" Her hand still typing on the keyboard. Sakuragi replied, "Yes. The opening night is coming up, so I find it a bit strange." Then she asked him, "Normally, before an opening night, you should be completely focused on Hiragi-kun." Hearing these words, Masato's eyes flickered with sadness before he said, "But Duya-kun is not a child anymore." At this point, Sakuragi seemed to notice something. Seeing this, Masato asked her, "What's wrong?" Sakuragi answered him, Could I borrow your glasses for a moment?" Although he didn't understand her intention, he still took off his glasses and gave them to her. "My glasses? Sure. Here." Sakuragi carefully took Masato's glasses with a handkerchief and said, "Excuse me, I think there's some dust or something on them." While cleaning Masato's glasses, she discovered a red liquid stain and wondered, "A blood stain?" Masato was also surprised. He leaned closer and asked, "What is this?" Sakuragi replied, "Maybe you got hurt somewhere without noticing." "I'm sorry. Let me wash it and give it back." In her heart, she was extremely anxious. That was close. Sakuragi became flustered as Masato leaned his face close to hers. She awkwardly handed the glasses back to him. "No, it's okay. I'll give them back right now." Afterwards, she clasped her hands, bowed her head, and apologized to him. "I'm sorry. I keep talking. I'll continue helping you." Putting his glasses back on, Masato said, "Thank you." But in Masato's mind, he was frantically thinking about the blood stain. That blood stain. It's most likely from when I handled the bodies. She's definitely started to suspect something, and she still has that blood-stained evidence. There's no way to deny it. As for Duya, he was now extremely worried. His face showed clear annoyance as he silently blamed himself. But jumping to conclusions is no good either. At least, wait until after my performance. It was as if another voice in his head was constantly nagging. "You've been too careless," Duya asked back irritably. "Are you threatening me?" That voice continued to question. "Are you planning to follow me?" Duya quickly replied to Masato, "No, I mean your way home." Masato was confused. "My way home? I can investigate," Duya replied. "Then I'm counting on you. Just please." Duya pleaded with Masato. "Don't act rashly," the other voice demanded. "Don't drag me into this." Duya's face was now gradually transforming with glowing red eyes and fangs that looked terrifying. Masato's voice continued to drone on. "Even if you say that, I understand. There's only one path left, right?" There's no doubt about it. Scene changed to that evening. Sakuragi was on the train heading home from work, thinking to herself, "I'm so tired. I ended up working overtime again." But just as she was thinking this, her phone suddenly rang, drawing attention. Messages from Masato continuously popped up on her phone screen. "Thank you for your help today. You really helped me a lot. You really helped me a lot." Seeing Masato's messages, Sakuragi's attitude did a 180-degree turn. She happily replied, "Not at all. I'm not sure how much help I was." But Masato continued to express his gratitude. "Thanks to you, I finished the documents earlier than expected. It's all thanks to you, Sakuragi-san." Seeing her secret crush say this, Sakuragi felt like flowers were blooming in her heart. She quickly replied, "I'm glad to hear that." As she got off the train, Sakuragi walked home, but didn't forget to reply to Masato's messages. "Please let me help again next time." Masato quickly refused. "No need. Sakuragi-san, you have your own work." But Sakuragi still tried to show concern. "It's fine. I'm more worried about your health." "Kiryu-san," Masato also replied, "about that, I'm sorry." Looking at the messages on her phone screen, Sakuragi felt confused. she thought to herself. I'm the one who should be sorry, because actually, I just wanted to sit next to you and thinking this. She suddenly stopped, her feet feeling as if they were hovering over an empty space. She was surprised and didn't understand what was happening to her. Her body felt like it was being sucked deep into a bottomless pit. When she came to her senses, she realized one of her feet had stepped into a dark manhole opening. Losing her footing, Sakuragi's body fell freely into the deep, dark sewer. Just like that, Sakuragi fell deeper, as if something was trying to pull her body down. The sound of an object hitting water echoed dryly in the silent night. Sakuragi lay motionless in the dark space, with only someone's thought echoing. The Phantom of the Opera. The Phantom. Eric. Duya emerged from the darkness like a monster wearing a human shell. He approached Sakuragi's motionless body in front of him, while his thoughts continued, deep beneath the opera house. There must be a hideout near an underground lake. He bent down, muttering disconnected words like a psychotic killer. He set traps in the lake to drown intruders, a curse of water. I never wanted to meddle in other people's business. But you all just keep coming here. Why do you chase after me? One of Duya's hands gripped Sakuragi's shoulder. The other supported her neck, his mouth still whispering to himself, "You people won't leave me alone, so annoying." Afterwards, he ruthlessly submerged Sakuragi's face in the cold water. Regardless of whether she was alive or dead, his mouth continuously repeating the curse. This is a curse for all, the curse of water. Sakuragi's hand emerged from the water's surface, trembling as if still trying to cling to her fragile life. When it was over, Duya looked at the cold hands that had just taken an innocent life with a pair of soulless eyes. Clutching his forehead, he slowly stood up. The faint light from the surface illuminated his small figure, making everything even more terrifying. Clutching his head, Duya screamed, "I know! You didn't really suspect me." Then he bent down to pick up Sakuragi's handbag, gently taking out the handkerchief she used to wipe the blood from Masato's glasses. Raising his hand high, Duya let the handkerchief fall gently, while his mind was filled with sick thoughts. You had feelings for Kiryu-san. Leaving Sakuragi's body behind, he walked away with his own baseless speculations. And then at some point, you would realize the truth and go to the police. He began to shed tears, not knowing if it was from guilt or from feeling too sorry for himself. Hiragi Duya had now truly become a crazed murderer. Thoughts continuously echoed in his head. You are the one who is right. We are the ones who are wrong. He thought of Masato's words. At this point, your life is practically Shizuko-san's life. Those tears kept flowing, but they couldn't wash away all the questions in his heart. But for that very reason, I promise you. He looked at Sakuragi's hand slowly sinking into the cold water. Duya could only bow his head before the body of the unfortunate victim he had murdered, along with a statement full of belated regret. I will go to hell, that's for sure. At the theater where Duya's performance was held, a few days after Misaki Sakuragi's disappearance, the stands were already filled with people who came to see Duya's performance, The Phantom of the Opera, 2023, opening day. An hour before the performance, Duya had finished his makeup for the role. Sitting in front of the mirror, he listened to Masato's report. It seems someone has reported Misaki Sakuragi missing. Standing outside, Masato calmly told him, "We were lucky she fell." Huh? With his hair obscuring his face, Duya replied, "I'll warn you about one thing." Duya's cold eyes and emotionless words sent a shiver down Masato's spine, making him break out in a sweat. She didn't fall. We pushed her. Looking at himself in the mirror, he continued, "Even if you've helped me before, I can't ignore it when you distort the truth." This made Masato think. Before a performance, Duya-kun always exudes an overwhelming presence. He's like a completely different person. Pushing up his glasses, Masato's face seemed very pleased. He thought to himself, and today, that pressure is just like the phantom. Thinking this, he suddenly suggested, respect for the dead. Is that what you think? Not waiting for Masato to finish, Duya quickly cut in. No, it's disgust for lies. Hearing all of Duya's words, Masato also understood one thing clearly, but that nobility is a burden. It could destroy you. At this, he quickly spoke up. Sorry, but taking on more guilt is also a form of lying. Clenching his fist, Masato made a silent decision. Forget it. For the goal of leading Duya-kun to become the greatest actor, looking at Duya's emotionless face in the mirror, Masato understood one thing. Even if it means trampling on Hiragi Duya's conscience. Then he whispered in Duya's ear, her fate was sealed by her own carelessness. It's not Duya-kun's fault. Hearing this, Duya could no longer stand the lies. He turned around to protest. No, I submerged her. Anyone can see that it's my fault. Masato sighed helplessly, thinking to himself, he won't waver. Meanwhile, Duya was still trying to rebut. You're speaking nonsense again. After a moment, Masato bent down and said to Duya, sorry. Yes, but without letting him say more. Duya quickly cut in. Of course, there was an element of luck, but only a little, because at this, he clutched his head in frustration. I knew Sakuragi-san. Thinking of Sakuragi's figure, Duya continued, her height, her personality, her habits. Then he continued to list Sakuragi's other characteristics. The way she walks, even the length of her stride. Then it was about his colleagues. We worked at the same company. I observed her that closely. Also, her way home is a deserted Vodo road. Remembering how Sakuragi was engrossed in her phone, Duya confessed confusedly to Masato, I even knew how to distract her so she wouldn't watch her step. After that, it was just calculation. Which manhole cover would she step on? I just had to guess based on the map and open the cover. His hands still clutching his head, Duya continued, even if I failed, I just needed to make sure she would die. Duya was extremely disturbed thinking about what he had done. He said, I replayed it over and over. Then he remembered he himself was the one who pried open the manhole cover that night. As long as there was a possibility she suspected you, I would do it again. Time after time. The fire of hatred began to burn brightly in his heart. Do you think I'm dangerous? Hearing these words, Masato quickly replied, no, not at all. Duya still didn't believe him. He shouted, then think carefully. The day you feel that way, you can leave me anytime. While the two were arguing, there was a knock on the door from outside. Someone's voice called out as a reminder, Hiragi-san, it's time. Stopping his negative words, he quickly replied to the person outside, thank you. Then he turned back to look at Masato and said, well then, Kiryu-san. Afterwards, he swished his cloak, sending rose petals flying, looking incredibly cool, along with an invitation. Enjoy the show, the performance of a murderer. Outside, the bright stage lights had been turned on, signaling the start of the play. In the packed auditorium, the Phantom of the Opera, a talented but unfortunate man because of his grotesque appearance. In the wings, Masato stood waiting for the stage curtain to be slowly raised. With a monologue, Phantom Eric, a man who did not hesitate to kill, ultimately saved by love, of the singer Christine, whom he yearned for. In other words, Masato was also stunned, his eyes wide at Duya's divine performance on stage. On stage, the spotlight seemed to focus on Duya as the centerpiece. In that moment, Masato remembered the image of the small Hiragi Duya he first met. But now, Duya had become a talented actor standing on the stage. It was because of love. He also remembered the times he laughed and played with Duya in the past. But now in that boy's eyes, only sad, regretful tears of a crazed murderer remained. A stark contrast to the innocent, pure smile of a child from long ago. Humans are guided by love. The audience watching this performance was also filled with a myriad of emotions. Some were wide-eyed with astonishment, some were in awe of Duya's talent, and some were crying with emotion. But what was the true emotion that Duya needed? After a moment, A few people started clapping. This was followed by the entire hall filling with applause for a talented actor, for a performance overflowing with emotion. Standing on stage, Duya also had to quickly wipe away his own tears. Perhaps he had truly succeeded with this role, more than anyone else. The most emotional person was probably Masato. He was so happy that tears streamed down like a waterfall. He remembered the warm handshake from before and Duya's words of thanks. "Thank you so much." Along with that were his shy words. "You're the first person to treat me like this, Kiryu-san." At this moment, Masato had completely broken down, his tears falling freely. He subconsciously looked down at his own hands. Outside, all the actors were bowing to the esteemed audience, while Duya was greeting the other actors. "Good work today. Great job." Someone was approaching and calling out, "Hiragi-san." It turned out to be the young crew member from before. As he walked, he praised Duya. "You were amazing, as always." "No, today was the best ever." Hearing these winged compliments, Duya humbly replied, "It's all thanks to you practicing with me so much. Please continue to help me in the future." "Yes, of course." Masato alone stood silently behind the stage wings, waiting for Duya. As he got closer, Duya told Masato, "Masato-san, let's go to the dressing room." Masato was startled and replied, "Oh, right." Once inside the dressing room, Duya took off his wig and asked Masato, "So, what did you think? My performance as a murderer?" Putting the wig down, he asked again, putting aside natural talent. "Was that performance worth sacrificing a life?" Duya continued, "If you think it wasn't, even for a moment, at this." Masato bowed deeply and shouted, "I'm sorry." The tears wouldn't stop falling. Along with Masato's confession, "I'm the one who was wrong." Facing a bewildered Duya, Masato continued to apologize. "I'm sorry, I was wrong." Wiping away his tears, Masato said, "The monster Eric. That performance was incredible." These actions left Duya stunned in amazement. Regaining his composure, Masato's expression was now incredibly resolute. "I believed." Without waiting for Duya to react, Masato rushed forward, grabbing his hand and shouting, "You will be written into history as an actor who can captivate everyone." Then suddenly, his voice dropped. He then continued his confession. "I was so foolish. I truly did believe in you." But it seemed his conscience was eating him alive. So now he was trying to explain himself like he was trying to win back an ex-lover. "I just believed." Everything stopped there. "I'm truly ashamed of myself." Duya bowed his head and asked Masato, "Can you bear it?" He looked up, straight at Masato, and said, "After Sakuragi, you must have realized. I will drag you down with me." Masato's eyes widened to their limit upon hearing these words. The haunting images of the victims Duya had killed, along with his questioning words, still echoed. "And things will get even worse. I might make mistakes again. I can't deny that." Duya looked straight into Masato's eyes and asked him, "Can you still bear it?" Suddenly, Masato gave a strange smile and asked back, "Bear it?" Masato laughed maniacally and shouted, "Why do I need to bear it?" Grabbing Duya's shoulders, Masato now looked more like a demon than Duya himself. He growled, "That performance?" Remembering Duya's play, he continued, "The darkness of the demon, black as a bottomless abyss, the light of humanity, brilliant as the sun." And Duya's expression during that performance as well, Masato shouted maniacally, "It all becomes nourishment to make you grow, all of your experiences." He seemed to have gone mad, raising his hands to the sky, his mouth continuously spewing gruesome words. If that's the case, why not kill more? That's right. Let's narrow down the roles. Masato's expression was now incredibly contorted, as if this was his true nature, only the role of the murderer. Let's engrave that into this world. Masato danced frantically, as if he had just discovered a true genius. Hiragi Duya, the murderer, make everyone, make this whole world acknowledge that. And then Unexpectedly, Masato tilted his head and whispered in Duya's ear, You will become one of a kind. Meanwhile, Duya just bowed his head and asked him back, but if I limit my roles, I'll have fewer roles, and my mother's surgery costs? Realizing the problem, Masato reassured Duya, You don't need to worry about money. We'll figure that out later. Masato continued, Well, I also gathered some data on your value to request an advance for the hospital bills, but it's not needed anymore. Seeing Duya's sad expression, Masato encouraged him. Let me carry the burden for you. He excitedly told him. After that performance, everything else became meaningless. Following that was an incredibly brilliant psychological manipulation by Masato. Forget about that data, because it's meaningless now, without knowing that Duya's inner thoughts were, I wanted you to abandon me, to look at me like a madman and leave. More than ever, at this very moment, Duya was the one suffering the most, but you were the one who awakened the actor in me. Duya remembered Masato's excited eyes from before. That day, when you applauded for me. It wasn't because I was her son or because I was a child. It was because of the performance itself. At that time, Duya was very shy, but he understood. You inspired me to step onto the stage. That's when Hiragi Duya truly began. Duya sighed and said, I understand, Masato-san. Masato was bewildered. Duya-kun? He told himself inwardly, I understand. I know what I need to do. Looking at the person opposite him, Duya decided first, I will free Masato-san from me, not by turning myself in because I won't die. I won't let that happen. I will bring life back to your faded eyes. Duya was now full of regret. I dragged you into this and ruined you. No one else but me. Remembering Sakuragi's image, he thought to himself, and once everything is over, I will take responsibility for everything and walk into hell. Duya closed his eyes tightly. Sakuragi-san, we will keep our promise. A moment later, he told Masato, despite everything, for now, let's not limit the roles. Not everyone will agree like you. Masato-san, sitting with his chin on his hand and legs crossed, Duya calmly said, especially when it comes to money. Seeing Duya's attitude, Masato snapped, No, that's with a bored expression. Duya continued, Besides, I want to try all sorts of roles. Masato replied with half-closed eyes. Well then, I guess that can't be helped, but then he enthusiastically cheered for him. Our direction won't change. I really think it's a great way to build a brand. Duya was speechless at Masato's actions. Afterwards, he couldn't help but laugh at the clumsy words of encouragement. And so, the two managed to dispel the gloomy atmosphere. At the same time at the police station, as Tatsumi was about to enter, someone called out, Oh, Inohara-san. Kotaro raised a hand in greeting. Are you closing up for today? Seeing Kotaro, Tatsumi replied dejectedly, Yeah, tough day. Inui. This young man is Inui Kotaro, 27 years old. Stepping outside, Tatsumi waved to the officer on duty at the gate. I'm just coming back to change, Kotaro exclaimed. Eh? Squad 1 is harsh. If it were me, I'd never leave the house again. Hearing Kotaro say this, Tatsumi quickly said, Don't say that like you're 50. On the way, Tatsumi mentioned the recent case. There's a tricky case going on. It can't be helped. Kotaro let out an ah and asked, The one related to Hanaya-san? Hearing the term Hanaya, Tatsumi was confused and asked back, Hanaya? What's that? Kotaro didn't hesitate to explain it to the father of one. It's a code name, to refer to the bodies. Then Kotaro also wondered, I'm not even sure who first started calling them that. Stretching, Tatsumi complained. What a bad sense of humor. As the two were waiting at a red light, a billboard on the side of the road kept playing some song. Then it suddenly switched to Midori's interview. Good evening. I'm still sleepy today, but I'm here to promote the Garden of Murderers. Tatsumi wasn't interested, but Kotaro seemed quite intrigued and looked up. On the show, Midori was very enthusiastic and continuously promoted the play. After a while, Kotaro pointed at the billboard and said, Speaking of which, Is it true that Midori Akamatsu is dating actor Duya Hiragi? Is it for real? Every time they appear on TV, people online say they're very close. And so, the two of them stopped to watch the program for a long while. Kotaro sighed dejectedly to Tatsumi. I hope some tabloid publishes that news soon. Looking at the posters, he continued, but if that happens, the posters might get taken down too. As for Tatsumi, his mind was only on the name Hiragi Duya. Meanwhile, Midori's interview continued to play. My family used to tell me, you'd probably sleep through your own murder. That's what they used to say to me. I'd wake up. Really now? Tatsumi remembered his previous meeting with Duya and thought to himself, there's something about him. Something just keeps bothering me. While Tatsumi was thinking, the bodies we found and his aura, they're both similar and different. Kotaro was still chattering on with his story, but I heard he's a great actor. A love scandal probably won't affect his reputation much. Hearing this, Tatsumi thought again. Actor, acting. Suddenly, Kotaro called him. Inohara-san, if you're heading back, want to grab a bite? There's a late-night sushi place nearby. Feeling annoyed, Tatsumi turned to glare at him with eyes that could kill. Hey, Inui, do you think an actor can completely change their personality when they're acting? Hearing such a question made Kotaro break out in a sweat, his face scrunching up like a monkey eating a chili. But his seriousness didn't last more than 30 seconds before his playful nature resurfaced. I'm not an actor, so I wouldn't know. Tatsumi was also at a loss for words with this guy and said, I see. A week has passed since the discovery of the two male bodies. The current situation is not promising. We still have no leads on the suspect. If there's any clue at all, it's just Tatsumi was still stuck in his own thoughts, a gut feeling. Even getting an address is difficult, let alone an interrogation. Without noticing a woman being harassed behind him, while he was wondering, how can I meet him again? Midori behind him screamed loudly as a man bothered her. Ugh, so persistent. The noise was so loud that Tatsumi had to turn and look, only to see a drunken man spewing flirty lines at Midori. Don't say that, please. We had fun drinking together, seeing how clingy the guy was. Midori shouted, that's a completely different story. Don't misunderstand just because we talked once. She pushed the man's hand away and threatened him. Stop following me. Do you want me to call the police? The drunkard still tried to cling on. Sorry. Seeing the injustice, Tatsumi rushed over, held up his police badge, and questioned. I'm a police officer. Is something wrong? The drunkard sobered up instantly upon hearing police. Eh? Police? Midori, on the other hand, was wide-eyed with surprise. Wait, a plainclothes police officer? This is my first time seeing one. The other man quickly ran away, shouting as he went, No, I didn't do anything. Goodbye. Midori, on the other hand, cursed at him harshly. Get lost. I'll ignore you next time. Seeing this scene, Tatsumi felt helpless and could only say, I'm glad you're safe. Then he turned to leave. Sorry, but Midori didn't. She grabbed his arm. Hey, by the way, can you walk me home? What if he follows me? Tatsumi sighed tiredly. This is insane. And so, Midori pulled Tatsumi's arm and walked. Don't worry, it's nearby. If anything happens, I'll say on my show that a police officer helped me. A great image boost for me. Tatsumi wondered. Show? Hearing this, Midori turned around, struck a pose, and introduced herself. Actually, I'm a celebrity. You know? The situation continued until Duya got home. He was stunned speechless at the sight of a drunk Midori. Seeing Duya arrive, Midori yelled loudly, Duya, you're back. This is Officer Ino? Inaki? Waving to Duya, Tatsumi corrected his name. It's Inohara. Midori pointed at Tatsumi and said, Inaki was the one who helped me when that guy was harassing me. Looking at Tatsumi, Duya thought to himself, I didn't expect to meet again like this. Feeling awkward, Tatsumi rubbed his head and asked Duya, but if something were to happen, everything would be a mess, right? So, how should I explain this? Unable to stay calm any longer, Duya called out, Hey, Midori, approaching the drunk Midori. Duya asked her. Normally in this situation, people would think you're cheating, right? But Midori's reply was completely unrelated. I'm not a normal person anymore. Seeing this, Tatsumi could only think to himself, wow, this person. Afterwards, Duya bowed his head to apologize to Tatsumi. I'm sorry. Inohara-san, I didn't mean to cause trouble, and please keep my relationship with Midori a secret. Seeing this, Tatsumi quickly stood up and waved his hands. No, I'm the one who should be sorry. So, your relationship is really like the rumors say? After this, Tatsumi had to secretly praise Kotaro. This Kotaro guy really gets his information. Midori, on the other hand, held up an apple and questioned Duya. Wait, you two know each other? And peel me another apple, sitting down next to Midori. Duya peeled an apple while explaining to Tatsumi, well, a lot has happened. It's really a coincidence. Watching Duya peel the apple, Tatsumi secretly thought, he's peeling an apple. While feeding Midori the apple, Duya asked Tatsumi, how are your wife and Tinchan? Watching Duya's actions, he had to secretly praise him. What a considerate person. But on the outside, he still had to reply, yes, though I haven't seen them yet because I haven't been home. Suddenly, Duya asked a probing question. Is it related to the case from a few days ago? Realizing the other was testing him, Tatsumi quickly shut down the thought. I can't disclose information about the investigation. Seeing this, Duya quickly scratched his head in embarrassment. Ah, I see. And Tatsumi also gave a wry smile in response. Yes, that's right, everyone understood. Except for Midori, who asked, what happened in that case? But she wasn't interested in the issue for more than 5 seconds, and quickly stood up to run and find more drinks. Let's drink some more. Looking at Duya, Tatsumi probed, are you worried? Realizing the other's intention, Duya quickly reacted, of course, I'm worried about my lover's health, not giving up. Tatsumi emphasized the topic. No, I meant that case. Just as Duya reached for an apple, Tatsumi suddenly told him, actually, there's something I want to ask you. Duya wondered, what is it? Tatsumi didn't hesitate and posed a tricky question to Duya. How does it feel to kill someone? Feeling uncomfortable with the question, Duya replied in a low voice, I'm sorry, I don't really understand what you mean. Realizing his mistake, Tatsumi apologized. Sorry. I probably didn't make myself clear. Afterwards, he quickly rephrased his question. You mentioned before about playing the role of a murderer. Although he appeared friendly on the outside, inside Tatsumi was still thinking. That reaction was very natural. Then he explained to Duya, my job involves dealing with criminals. Guilt often causes them to have mental breakdowns. He also voiced his own question. I'm not familiar with acting, but imitating shocking actions or words can have negative effects. Duya calmly replied, there's nothing to it. While peeling the apple, Duya looked straight at the other person and said, that's not the case. Acting and reality are completely different. Popping a piece of apple into his mouth, Duya said, as you can see, I'm perfectly fine both physically and mentally. Hearing these words, Midori jumped down from the chair and snapped, that's a lie. Both Duya and Tatsumi widened their eyes in surprise at this statement. They both exclaimed in unison, a lie? This drunk girl didn't stop but shouted even louder, a complete lie. Then she lunged at Tatsumi and yelled in his face, listen, Inoki. Duya is always working. She mentioned how he's always acting and practicing. Playing the role of a delivery person to read scripts and build his character, practicing so engrossed that he even skips sleep just to work. At this point, Midori rushed over and grabbed Duya by the shoulders, shaking him back and forth, shouting in his ear, pay some attention to me, you jerk. Tatsumi sat opposite, helpless, thinking to himself, she's wasted. Feeling annoyed, Duya told Midori, you've had enough, Midori, unwilling to back down. Midori also snapped back, like I can just stop drinking right now. I've known you've lost weight since this play started. Tatsumi pensively watched this scene without being able to say a word as he was accidentally drawn into a hot drama. On this side, Midori pointed at Duya's face and said, honestly, Duya should prioritize me over work. What's the point of living without time for yourself? Duya, on the other hand, could only be helpless, drunk and still preaching, thinking of Kotaro's words. But he's a great actor, Tatsumi mumbled to himself. People say you're a genius. Then he said to both of them, but he's actually a very hard-working person. But Midori didn't think so. Maybe he's trying too hard. So dejected and helpless. Duya sighed. Hey Midori, I think it's time. But when he looked again, Midori had fallen asleep some time ago. She's asleep. Whoa, really? Seeing this, Tatsumi commented. She's a bit impulsive, but also really cute. Duya could only hold his head and confirm, honestly, she's helped me a lot. Then he suddenly called out. So, Officer Inohara. Hearing his name mentioned, Tatsumi replied, yes, holding the fruit knife in his hand. A menacing aura emanated from Duya. He asked Tatsumi, are you still suspicious of me? Seeing the scene before him, Tatsumi was also stunned, the hair on his neck standing on end. Seeing no reply from Tatsumi, Duya continued to deduce an answer for him. Well, not really suspicious, but curious. If you really suspected me, you would have worried about me running away and avoided meeting me directly. Feeling the atmosphere changing, Tatsumi thought to himself, what? The atmosphere? But when he observed Duya closely, he suddenly realized, no, has my personality changed? At the same time, Duya also spoke as if he could read Tatsumi's mind. Either way, I'm still a suspicious person. Even Tatsumi was sweating in this atmosphere. He asked Duya, why do you think that? Duya bowed his head and revealed, the first lesson I learned in acting was how to enter a seat. The way you sit reflects a lot about a person's heart. Remembering Tatsumi's earlier question, Duya continued, you're sitting up too straight. And when you answered the question about killing, I noticed a slight tension in your thighs. He continued, the police are watching me, monitoring my reactions. I understand that clearly. At this, Tatsumi had to admire. You're very calm, Tatsumi analyzed. In these situations, most people would panic. Meanwhile, Duya still had his head bowed and replied naturally, but rushing gets you nowhere. Turning the knife around, Duya explained to Tatsumi, what's important is the impression you have of me, Inohara-san. My image. Everything I do is to make you decide for yourself whether I'm innocent. Or, at this, Duya's face revealed the expression of a cold-blooded murderer. He hissed through his teeth, a murderer. Tatsumi gritted his teeth as he remembered meeting Duya near the crime scene. But now, facing Duya, he was hesitant and undecided. The pressure of a murderer is too obvious. Is it really him? But if he is the culprit, why would he reveal himself like this? What does he gain from it? Seeing Duya's smile, he secretly guessed. Is he provoking me? No, maybe he's sure. At this point, it seemed Tatsumi was once again trapped in Duya's myriad of different expressions. He thought that he won't be seen as the culprit. Then suddenly, Tatsumi tilted his head and dismissed the point. No, there must be a hint here. Tatsumi suddenly remembered the body of the unfortunate male victim. That fake feeling I had then is completely gone now. Suddenly remembering how Duya peeled the apple with his left hand, he thought again. Not to mention, the autopsy results showed the culprit was right-handed. So, thinking this, he spoke up. I don't think it was you. Opposite him, Duya added, but it's still not clear. And Tatsumi continued, this whole story is so vague. As the two were talking, there was a knock on the door. Duya quickly cut in. Ah, sorry, someone's here. Outside. Masato shouted through the camera screen. Duya-kun! Sorry, I just got the script for the next role. Recognizing it was Masato, Duya quickly said, thanks. Hearing the familiar voice, Midori, who was sleeping, sat up and called out loudly, Rikun! Tatsumi wondered, Rikun? Although drunk and sleepy? Midori still explained, Duya's manager. He's with Duya even more than I am, but he's still happy with me. Hearing this, A new suspicion arose in Tatsumi. A manager who's closer than a lover? Looking at Midori and Duya, he thought to himself, wait a minute. Meanwhile, Midori, holding a bottle in one hand and a glass in the other, ran to greet Masato. Rikun, come on in. Duya and Inaki won't drink with me, so you come in. Masato outside was also helpless with this girl, and Duya was sweating profusely, not knowing how to explain. At this moment, Tatsumi secretly repeated the words just spoken. Wait, Rikun, come on in. Duya and Inaki won't drink with me, so you come in. At this moment, Duya was still calculating in his head, I'm confident I can deceive them. I'm an actor. His hand reached out as if he were controlling puppets. Looking at the audience's expressions, he was certain, my job is to control how others see me. Turning his palm up, he was confident he could manipulate everyone. Thinking of Tatsumi, Duya didn't think he was an exception. Even if the opponent is a police officer, it's no different. But I feel he's different. And I did it. Duya at this point seemed to split into two entities. He was certain of one thing. I've made the suspect image move away from myself. I did it. So why? But when he looked back at the clamoring Midori, Duya was completely helpless. Come on, let's drink more. Drink with me. Masato was completely overwhelmed. He could only try to explain. That's why I told Midori-san to take a taxi. Your smell of alcohol is overpowering. He looked at the two of them joking around happily, but he himself was trying to encourage himself. No, don't lose heart, even if my accomplice is preoccupied with the police. Come on, me. After a while, Masato turned to say to Duya, anyway, Duya-kun. While handing the script to Duya, Masato said, this is the script I mentioned the other day. They kept insisting you take the role. It's almost like they were forcing you. Holding the script in his hand, Duya said, thanks, I'll take a look. As he flipped through the pages of the script, he thought, Inohara-san is probably trying to reconcile the discrepancy between the suspect's image and me. He must have started to consider the possibility of an accomplice, logically speaking. If I show that the relationship between me and Masato-san isn't close enough to cover for each other, it should be fine. Seeing Duya read the script, Midori started clamoring again. See? You're taking on more work again. You two, always sticking together so you conveniently throw things at each other, even when you're not working. Seeing the situation, Duya decided. First, I have to stop Midori. If this continues, my whole personality will be exposed. Cutting off his train of thought, Duya approached Midori and told her, look, Inohara-san is starting to feel awkward. On this side, Tatsumi also awkwardly replied, no, I'm fine. By the way, then he asked Masato, have you two been friends for a long time? Being asked, Masato also replied politely, yes, that's right. Only Duya was worried. Oh no, this conversation is heading in a worse direction. Seeing this, Tatsumi asked further, but as friends, you two seem to have a pretty big age gap. Seeing his curiosity, Masato also explained, I've met his mother before. Duya was sweating, secretly calculating in his head, even if it's forced. Don't let the conversation stop. Then he just let out an to confirm Masato's words. Suddenly, Tatsumi spoke up. This is just a hypothetical. His eyes filled with suspicion. He glanced at Masato and proposed a hypothesis. But if Hiragi-san committed a crime, Kiryu-san, what would you do? If that crime ended his acting career, what would you do? Meanwhile, Midori was wondering what Duya was holding in his hand, and he was sweating profusely, thinking to himself, wait, am I cornered? Suddenly, Duya's gaze became focused as if he had discovered something very interesting. On this side, Masato already knew Tatsumi's intentions clearly. He pushed up his glasses and replied, I'm not sure what you mean by that question. Tatsumi knew he had been too hasty and quickly made an excuse. Anyway, it's just a hypothetical, and we're drinking. Hearing the mention of drinking, Midori immediately held up a can of beer towards Tatsumi and shouted, Inaki! You haven't had a single drop. Masato's cold face and thick glasses seemed to hide his true emotions. Masato said slowly. Most people hate lies and deceit, things that don't follow common sense. Tatsumi looked straight at Masato and asked coldly, "Is that so?" Without hesitation, Masato replied, "Of course. I would advise him to turn himself in, for Duya-kun's sake." Receiving the answer, Tatsumi replied, "I see." Realizing the other seemed disappointed that he couldn't get anything out of him, Masato directly asked, "Are you not satisfied with that answer?" But the one who answered the question wasn't Tatsumi but Midori. She said, "Not at all." Hearing Midori say this, Masato turned to her and said, "I wasn't talking to you, Midori-san." With her hands behind her back, Midori casually confessed, "Sometimes I really think that..." Midori continued, "Rikaoi. Kun, you might be close to Duya, but..." With a half-drunk, half-sober expression, Midori said, "Your feelings are very superficial." When being told he was superficial, Masato clenched his fists and let out a "huh?" Midori didn't let Masato speak. She cut in. "Like, it's all just work, right?" Sitting opposite, Tatsumi also found it confusing and quickly asked, "You mean he's a golden goose?" These words made Masato tremble with anger. The fire of anger in Masato's heart erupted. He shouted, "Hey, that's too insulting, completely over the line." He placed a hand on his chest, his face furious, his voice incredibly determined. "No one wishes for Duya-kun's success more than I do." But Midori was not one to back down easily. She began to provide evidence. "For example, you wish for his success, not his happiness, right?" Just now, bringing her face closer to Masato's, Midori questioned, "You said, for Duya-kun's sake. That sounds so superficial." Afterwards, she turned to hug Duya and continued, "I'm still the best one to stand by Duya's side, regardless of the fact that Masato had completely gone insane." Seeing the situation getting tense, Tatsumi whispered to Duya, Hiragi-san, it's a bit too helpless." Duya was already too used to this scene. He advised Tatsumi, "Don't mind them. They're always like this. There are more important things." Getting back to the main topic, Duya looked up and asked Tatsumi, "Have you ever met a criminal with multiple personalities? I mean, in real life." Tatsumi asked back confusedly, "Multiple personalities?" Placing the script on the table. Duya pointed to it and said, "This script is about a criminal with two different entities." Still confused, Tatsumi scratched his forehead and replied guiltily, "For the role, you mean, I'm afraid I can't help." Looking up at the sky in contemplation, he continued, "Even though it's common on stage, in real life, unlike Tatsumi who had no answer, Duya's inner self was different. He thought to himself, no, I'm sure I've seen it. Changing roles, changing personalities. I've seen it, seen myself." He mulled over the script and then applied it to himself, finally reaching a conclusion. The possibility of an accomplice? Sure, you can believe that. But in return, reconsider. Allow yourself to doubt the lone wolf theory you were about to dismiss. Tatsumi's contemplative silhouette was reflected in Duya's eyes, he thought, and focus on the actor Hiragi Duya. After a moment of silence, Duya spoke up. "If that's the case, then..." Glancing towards Midori and Masato, who were arguing, Duya asked Tatsumi, "Do you know anyone with experience in cases like this?" On this side, Masato was furious. He yelled and questioned Midori. "Anyway, Midori-san, you're being unreasonable. It's not normal. Who invites a man they just met into their home?" Seeing the two of them like this, Duya looked up with some random thoughts in his mind. "I forgot. They're still arguing." Then he turned to look at the fuming Masato and realized Masato-san's face is flushed. That's dangerous. While his friend was still burning with anger, pointing at Midori's face and shouting, "You're going to get in trouble. You're going to get really hurt one day." Midori asked back confusedly, "Hurt? In what way?" Gritting his teeth, Masato growled, "Like, the things that have been happening lately." Sweat poured down Masato's face as he yelled, eyes gouged out, flowers left at the scene. that kind of stuff. Hearing his friend mention that case, Duya was also wide-eyed with surprise, letting out, huh? Oh no, it's over. If this gets out, it's game over. Duya was screaming in his mind, wait. When Masato mentioned the case, Tatsumi was also surprised. He stood up abruptly and asked again, Kiryu-san, you mean the double murder case from last week? His face now became extremely serious as he said, well, that's strange. We never released the detail about the flowers to the media, so how did you know? At this moment, Duya could only bow his head and silently lament, it's over. At this point, he also understood one thing, there's no way back, unless... But Masato pulled a spectacular U-turn. He appeared calm and nonchalant, replying to Tatsumi, how do I know? On an online forum. Seeing the case file had been leaked and posted online, Tatsumi rushed over to Masato in a panic, shouting, impossible! Where? Masato held out his phone, pointed at it, and said, I think it was on a local bulletin board around this area. When he saw the article, Tatsumi seemed to have received a shocking piece of news. His inner world shattered. He thought to himself, a leak? Without further hesitation, Tatsumi dashed off, but didn't forget to offer an apology. Sorry for the late night disturbance. Thanks for your cooperation. We're heading back to the station. Only Midori was left confused. She asked in surprise, hey, he's gone? Goodbye? Who didn't know? But Masato and Duya knew best that something was happening. Scene changed to the next day at Hiragi's management company. Duya understood the reason for getting Inohara-san out of the house, so that was Masato-san's goal. While concentrating on his work, Duya thought, yesterday's events made it clear. I need evidence. Hiragi Duya acted alone, without evidence. I already knew the outcome. He also realized something. But something that convenient. It doesn't exist. Then suddenly, a noise from outside made Masato ask in confusion, is something wrong? Suddenly, a man burst through the door, ignoring someone trying to hold him back. As he rushed in, he yelled, I've found you! Seeing someone barge into the middle of a meeting, Masato angrily scolded, what is this? We're in a meeting! But seeing him as invisible, the man rushed past. He ran directly to Duya, grabbed his hand tightly and shouted, Hiragi Duya, play the role of a murderer for us. Duya gave a forced smile but still broke out in a sweat at the man's words. I mean, you've already played that role. After wreaking havoc at Duya and Masato's meeting, they decided to go outside to talk. On the way, Toba spoke first. I can't believe you actually came to help us. What a relief. Glancing over, Duya asked him, there are a few things I want to ask you. As for Masato, he looked at Toba with an unfriendly gaze, but please don't show up unannounced again. This man is Toba Yudo, 28 years old. Hearing Masato and Duya's words, he glanced over, replying with an incredibly smug tone, come on, don't be like that. Manager Kun, walking behind him. Masato adjusted his glasses and questioned, you just missed a meeting for the play. If you came here just to obstruct Duya-kun, then... Without any restraint, Toba replied directly. Almost everyone from the theater company is here. It's convenient for introductions. A while later, they arrived at another room. Toba opened the door and gestured to everyone. All right, let's take a short break from practice. He stepped into the practice room, stood with his hands on his hips, and announced, this is about the remaining empty role. Standing behind and witnessing his actions, Masato asked in confusion, does this guy understand the situation? Meanwhile, Toba was still boasting to everyone. I even brought support with me. Masato turned to whisper to Duya, we haven't even received any applications. Hearing this, Duya asked Masato back, but this play is about a murderer, right? It'll have a bad effect on the brand. While he was still talking to Masato, he noticed Toba mentioning his name. Hiragi is here. He spread his arms wide to introduce Duya to the others. Everyone. I'm sure you've all seen him on TV, right? This is the actor Hiragi Duya. As a matter of courtesy, Duya also stepped forward and introduced himself. It's a pleasure to meet you all. He bowed his head to greet everyone under the scrutinizing gazes of those around him. "I'm Hiragi Duya. I apologize for interrupting your practice," when he greeted them. The crowd around him let out a collective "ooh" and began to chatter. Duya didn't feel comfortable, he thought. "They're looking at me like a criminal," while Toba grandly declared, "I want him to play the lead role." Afterwards, he recounted what he had observed at the performance the other day. "I've confirmed his acting skills on stage. He's probably the most suitable person in Japan for this role." Then he turned to say to Duya, "Let me introduce the members. You just need to remember the main actors. First," Duya remembered the script from last night, he thought to himself. "Intertwining Darkness, the play Toba invited me to join." Although a little suspicious, Duya still cheerfully went to greet everyone. Afterwards, he explained a little about the play. It's a suspenseful drama with comedic elements, set in America. The plot is roughly as follows: Intertwining Darkness, a simple story to understand. One is the main character, Knight, who is crying after discovering his wife's affair. At a bar, he meets a man named Evan, who has an identical face. Let's play it all out. Two is Evan feels pity for Knight and comes up with a plan to kill his wife and her lover. If we act at the same time, splitting into two directions, even if we're suspected, it will be hard to catch us. But actually, Evan is Knight's second personality. I am you. So how do we split up and act? Of course, the plan fails. The result is that Knight is pursued by the police on suspicion of murder. So, what should I do? Standing to one side, Duya watched Masato and Toba talking. He thought to himself, "Now I understand Knight's suffering." Suddenly, a young man ran over and said, "Could you stop for a moment?" Feeling aggrieved at being forced to practice nonstop, this young man questioned Masato. "Manager, is this for real? We've been practicing for 8 hours a week for this play." While Masato was still flustered, he continued, "And it's not even 20 days until the performance, right? Are you kidding me?" Seeing this scene, Duya thought it's the other way around. Duya remembered the schedule for the performances. He said to himself, Intertwining Darkness premieres right after the Phantom of the Opera ends, depending on the theater, but usually. It requires months of rehearsal. Seeing Toba sighing and Masato struggling to explain, Duya realized the problem. He's still performing in the Phantom. No matter how you look at it, this is irresponsible. A while later, the young man suggested, so we need to adjust the performance schedule. Toba heard this and stopped him. Hold on. Then he glared with his dark, sunken eyes like an addict and questioned. It seems everyone is misunderstanding something. Leaning close to the young man, Toba relentlessly applied pressure. Postpone the performance? Do you know how much money that costs? Glancing at Duya, Toba explained. Normally, he wouldn't even look at a small stage like ours, so it's best to be grateful. Afterwards, he grabbed the young man's collar, making him break out in a cold sweat. What you should be saying is, thank you. Understand? Unexpectedly, Duya reached out to stop him and called, Toba-san, being stopped in his tracks. He was surprised and let out a, huh? Duya began to speak in a very creepy tone to Toba. The way I say this might sound a little harsh, but approaching Toba, Duya offered an explanation. I understand that husband's feelings. These words made Toba's mouth hang open in confusion. Then he suddenly remembered a line from the script. Everyone feels that way. Duya directly performed a scene for everyone to see. I was so worried. The more he acted, the more he got into character. But I'll find a way. Letting go of the young man's collar, Toba quietly called, Hiragi. Looking at him, he opened his mouth to smile and said, Don't tell me. You already... I know you got the script, but at this moment, Masato added, I just gave it to him at 10 last night. Hearing this, the young man was also wide-eyed with surprise. In just one night, Duya stood boldly in the middle of the crowd and declared, As you can see, I'm not at a level where I can stand firm on the stage. His sad eyes looked around and he continued, But I have grasped the personalities of the two main characters, Knight and Evan. Trying to use all his emotions to persuade everyone, he said, "So let me start from the beginning. I will give my all for this play." Then he bowed his head and said, "Please, give me a chance to stand on stage with everyone to make this play a success." He also sincerely asked for everyone's help. If there's anything that's not right, please just say so. But 30 seconds later, his attitude changed, his face exuding the murderous aura of a bloodthirsty wolf. He slowly uttered each word, "Because I will also do my best to prove myself." Outside, Masato was on the verge of tears, clenching his fists, deeply moved. After this emotional speech, the young man from before dejectedly walked away, saying, "I understand." Only Duya was sweating, bewildered, not understanding anything. "Huh? Why is the atmosphere so strange? I was being sincere. Did I lose out?" Toba shouted loudly. "All right, let's continue practicing." Then he went over and patted Duya's back, telling him, "You've convinced me again. I see the madness in your eyes." Hearing this, Duya could only manage a wry smile while thinking to himself, "Trust is like a castle. You can't build it in one night." Watching Masato leave with Toba, Duya thought again. And one last thing. This stage is something that can only be formed when everyone practices together. Sometimes, your character's personality will change a lot afterwards. He went to greet the other actors who were practicing. In other words, the most important thing is acting reflexes. Remembering his conversation with Tatsumi last night, he understood one thing. If someone notices you hesitate for even a second when changing roles, his eyes showed a determined look about his thoughts. They'll realize immediately, he's acting, and consider it a failure. Suddenly, someone called him. He turned around in surprise and replied, "Yes?" It turned out to be a girl who wanted to talk to him. She approached and warned, "That person, it's best not to get too close to Toba." Hearing these words, Duya was confused and just hummed in response. Then she bowed her head to greet him. "See you then," afterwards. She turned and walked away. The atmosphere also changed at this moment. Duya was very confused, not knowing what the girl meant. Watching the girl leave, Duya learned that her name was Kimura Mana. He also commented on Mana. Her acting is only average in this play. She plays a female bartender. Duya observed her intently. She only appears for a few minutes at the beginning, with no lines. But only Duya understood one thing. It's not that she's not trying. It's just that she lacks experience, the experience to push past others to get a role. During practice, Duya was always watching her. The words she once said to me. Now, after a few days of practicing, I think I'm starting to understand what she meant. Don't get close to Toba, lost in thought. Suddenly, Midori lowered her horrifying face, her voice chilling. Are you thinking about another woman? Ignoring Midori, Duya remained silent and read the script without replying. A while later, he replied to Midori, Yeah, I am thinking about her, an actress in the theater company I'm supporting. Hearing Duya confess he was thinking about another woman, Midori went into lioness mode and threatened him. Let me make it clear. Duya, you're misunderstanding. Hearing this, Duya asked back confusedly, Misunderstanding? Midori stretched and then said, I heard a rumor. She turned around to look at him and asked, That theater company is called Ryokei Suzusa, Green Shadow Creation, right? The atmosphere there is terrible. Mentioning Toba, Midori also commented, The director is just a figurehead. The one who really runs the show is the assistant director, a real big shot. I heard he's a good actor, but he remembered the scene of him bullying his subordinate while listening to Midori criticize him. His personality is unbearably bad. He does whatever he wants, from his words to sexual harassment. She also added, That's why the atmosphere is always tense, and people keep leaving one after another, hearing these words. Duya thought to himself, No wonder everyone looks familiar. Sitting on the bed, Midori said, in a place like that. Just being kind is enough to stand out. Then she concluded, So, even if Duya is captivated by that girl, it's just an illusion. Duya also denied, No, I'm not captivated. Ignoring Duya's explanation, Midori uttered a sentence that sent a chill down his spine. "If you betray me, I don't know what I'll do." Sweat dripped down as Duya secretly glanced at Midori without daring to say a word. Scene changed to the stage. Duya was practicing with Toba. He also had to admit to himself, Midori is right, Toba has very good acting skills and observation. During practice, Toba commented, "It's still not enough for a normal actor. It might be enough, but you can go deeper into the role, right?" He rested his chin on his hand and replied, "Yes." At this moment, he fell into deep thought again. When maintaining a conversation while switching between two personalities, speed is the key factor. But if you focus too much on the switching speed, you can't get into character. On the other hand, if you get deep into the role, the speed slows down. No, the problem is with the latter. The switching speed is still not fast enough. Suddenly, someone ran over and interrupted Duya's train of thought. "Excuse me, Toba-san. There's been a slight change in the arrangement." After hearing this person's report, Toba reverted to his gangster ways and yelled, "Huh? Can't you see I'm talking? Are you blind?" The other person was terrified and could only bow and scrape. "I'm sorry. This guy's cursing only got more intense. Use your head for a second. How many years have you been in this business?" Seeing the tense atmosphere, Duya quickly spoke up to intervene. "Toba-san, it's all right. I'll go over there." Then Duya asked him, "You're busy too, right?" When talking to Duya, his attitude changed 360 degrees. "No need to worry. But I'm not worried about Hiragi." Toba suddenly turned his back and started gesturing with his hands and feet, a radiant aura seeming to emanate from him. He said, "Every stage needs conflict. Light and dark, yin and yang, light and shadow." The detective role this time. Seeing him act like a lunatic, Duya had no choice but to praise him. "Toba-san is the light." Looking at the other staff member, Duya asked again, "And Night, the murderer character I'm playing, is the darkness, right?" Duya also noticed a very fresh wound on this person's face. He thought to himself, a new wound. That must have hurt when he was hit. Toba was still flailing about. "I'm counting on you. How brightly I can shine depends on you too." Duya was still looking at the other staff member and thinking, Toba can't see it. He can't see the pain or the hateful look in others' eyes. Duya also made a decision. People like this are not rare, but to be able to ignore it so coldly. Suddenly, he turned and winked at him. "Hey, Hiragi, are you free tomorrow?" He tilted his head back and laughed heartily, revealing his plan. "I'm thinking of getting everyone together to hang out at my place." Hearing this, he suddenly remembered Masato's warning. If Toba Yuto invites you to do anything, absolutely do not accept. Duya remembered Masato's serious expression. "I've heard some very dark rumors." He also had some thoughts of changing his mind. "Honestly, I'm starting to want to drop this role too, no matter how good the acting is." Thinking this, Duya immediately found an excuse to decline Toba's invitation. "Sorry, I have the Phantom during the day and then a TV recording in the evening." Toba expressed disappointment when he heard Duya decline. "Your schedule is really packed." Afterwards, he put his arm around the other staff member's neck and said, "It's fine. It can't be helped. But talented people should know how to choose their work, understand?" As he walked away with his arm around the other person, he called back, "Life is for enjoying." Watching him leave, Duya thought to himself, "All right, let's practice to clear my head." 3 hours later, Duya's voice was heard. "I think that's a bit too much." On the other end of the line, Masato shouted loudly, "I was definitely planning to go home early today," which scared Duya. Masato-san is angry. After hanging up, he left. As he walked, he thought, the ability to get into character. I should probably delve deeper into my current character instead of getting distracted by random thoughts. Lost in thought, he suddenly heard a strange sound coming from a room. He decided to open the door to check, asking in a clear voice, "Is anyone still here?" It turned out to be Toba inside. He was completely naked. Seeing it was Duya. He turned around and said, "Oh, it's Hiragi? Practicing alone until this late?" Next to him was a cowering girl, also without a scrap of clothing. He continued to invite him with his disgusting voice. "I clearly said before practice that I would go home early today. Since you're here, why don't you use her too?" Seeing this scene, Duya asked him, "Toba-san, what do you mean?" Hearing him ask, he grabbed Kimura's ear and pulled her over to introduce her. "This little thing's name is Kimura. Her body and face are not bad. I use her like this sometimes." So, as it turns out, this Toba had been tired of breathing for a while now and decided to provoke Duya's madness. He coldly called out, "You..." Duya once again flashed that terrifying smile. He thought, even more disgusting than I imagined. Intertwining darkness. Toba, not seeing Duya reply, put on his disgusting face again and asked, "What's wrong? Hiragi, you're not used to this kind of thing?" He was still thinking, a script about a murderer with two personalities. At this point, this idiot still didn't know he was about to be reunited with his ancestors and was still spouting those disgusting words. What a waste. You should at least keep one girl to order around as you please. Duya was still busy with his own thoughts. Based on a classic work of the psychological thriller genre, he looked at the palm of his hand and pondered. Can a human being live like this, completely blind to others? Masterpieces will never fade. He remembered the play he had just accepted, a way of life unbound by anything or anyone, because those works contain the unchanging emotions of human beings. Duya also understood something. Expressing emotions. The emotion this play wants to convey is, he remembered the moments of the cheating wife. The husband was blindly jealous, only knowing how to get drunk, helpless. Seeing Duya standing there clutching his head, Toba rested his hands on his hips and asked, "Huh? What's wrong? Don't want to see a man in his underwear?" Then he turned around to find his clothes. No other way. Guess I'll put on some pants. Duya was still muttering the words Toba had said earlier. Use like this. Duya reached out and picked up the hammer in front of him, his mouth still repeating those words, sometimes like this. Hey, you. Gripping the hammer in his hand, he raised it high. No other way. I'll put on some pants. Hearing these words, Toba was surprised and let out a huh by the time he realized it. Duya's arm was already swinging before his bewildered eyes. Duya repeated his words. Life is for enjoying. Afterwards, only a blood-curdling scream echoed through the dark room. It's certain that Duya had sent this despicable scumbag to the afterlife. The owl statue seemed to glow as it witnessed Duya punishing the scum Toba. He was now lying motionless on the floor. In Kimura's sight now, Duya was like a monster holding a hammer and approaching her. Suddenly, Toba jumped up and shouted loudly, "Hey, that hurts!" It turned out he wasn't dead yet and still had the strength to scream. Seeing he wasn't dead, Duya flashed a crazed smile and whirled around. Duya's arm holding the weapon was reflected in the eyes of the owl statue. Duya showed no mercy. He swung the weapon with great force at Toba's head, from his eyes to his smile. Duya had transformed into a different person. A sharp sound echoed. Ketchup splattered everywhere, even on the statue high above. He rested the ketchup-covered hammer on the ground. Duya clutched his face and called out in a low voice, "Kimura-san." Then he remembered Kimura's warning. That person. It's best not to get close to Toba. He stood up, flashed a gentle smile, and thanked her. Thank you for the warning. A while later, Masato also arrived. He was contemplative, silently looking at the scene before him. Duya was kneeling, bowing his head to confess to Masato. Honestly, looking at the two young people in front of him, Masato sighed and finished for Duya. There's no way to explain this. Kimura knelt beside him, thinking to herself, no matter what happens, I'll stand by Duya-kun. And Duya was thinking, that's right, the way Kimura-san is acting right now. Looking at Kimura, who was screaming in fear, Duya thought, if she reports this, then at that time, Masato asked her, why? Kimura stammered in reply, Hiragi-san, to help me. So, Without letting Kimura finish, Masato coldly cut her off. I find that hard to believe. Anyone can just say that. Seeing Masato didn't believe her, Kimura panicked and offered, I'll tell the police I did it. It's my fault. But once again, Masato rejected the offer. I can't allow that. He thought about her reporting to the police. The killer is Hiragi-san, then looked at her with a cold gaze and questioned, Can you guarantee that after confessing? You won't retract your statement? Seeing things getting tense, Duya quickly tried to calm them down. Masato-san, calm down. Just then, Kimura made a bold decision. She reached for the weapon with the intention of leaving her fingerprints on it and said, Then I'll also, holding the weapon tightly, she decided, I'll be the culprit too. If you've decided to confess, then there's no need for excuses. Suddenly, Duya reached out to stop Kimura. He said, I'm sorry. Approaching the panicked Kimura, Duya comforted her. It's the other way around. Kimura-san, I'm the one who dragged you into this. Although his expression was currently terrifying, his words were incredibly warm. You did nothing wrong. In his heart, Duya also couldn't understand. I didn't expect it. Didn't think she had such courage. Another thought flashed through his mind. No, maybe she's even more decisive than I thought. Now, it was as if another personality had appeared in him. He repeated his words. Decisive, huh? Without further thought, Duya snatched the weapon towards himself, staring at Toba's motionless body on the ground. Masato decided, well then, let's make him disappear. Now, how do we dispose of him? Kimura stammered a suggestion. My hometown is about an hour's drive from here. Hearing this, Masato asked confusedly, is that information necessary right now? She awkwardly continued, yes, there's a swamp. Then she described the scenery of that place to the two of them. Quiet, deep, no one goes there. If we sink him there, then... Hearing this, Masato requested Kimura, please lead the way. As for the cleanup afterwards, she also offered, I'll take care of it. That's what I plan to do, Masato decided. We'll finish everything tonight. A while later, the three were settled in Masato's car. He suddenly made a suggestion. I'm going to be quiet for a while. Looking at the body in the trunk, he also reminded everyone, checkpoints and surveillance cameras. We have to drive carefully, thank you. Sitting in the car, Duya was silent. He looked out at the scenery, lost in thought, not saying a word. Suddenly, Kimura spoke up, breaking the oppressive atmosphere. Duya turned to ask her. Yes? Is there something wrong? She clenched her hands and said hesitantly, well, why? She suddenly burst into tears amidst Duya's confusion. In intertwining darkness. Why do you think Night accepted the offer to kill, as if feeling she was being strange? Kimura quickly turned to apologize. Sorry. To ask that at a time like this. Duya had to laugh at this girl's naive words. It's okay. It helps to distract my mind. Thank you. Afterwards, he looked at her and praised. Miss Kimura, you're a very thoughtful person. Hearing these words, Kimura replied shyly, I'm not that great. Duya suddenly looked up and hummed a line from the play. Half loneliness, half happiness, I guess. His eyes stared into the distance as he repeated the words. Personality disorders, multiple personalities. One of the causes of dissociative identity disorder is being ignored for a long time. He also described everything for Kimura to understand. Existence, emotions, self-affirmation. Knight probably had to suppress all those things. Or maybe he grew up in an environment where there was no other choice but to suppress himself. That's why he created a personality that acknowledged him and found salvation. That's how I understand it. Hearing this, Kimura said, so, loneliness and happiness, Duya calmly explained. He couldn't refuse. Suddenly, Duya's phone buzzed with a message. He thought, a message from Masato-san. In the message, he wrote, sorry for messaging so late. Can I ask you something? About Kimura-san. Is that person really necessary for the play? I'm worried. Thinking about Kimura. Masato was worried. Could she ruin your performance? What do you think about removing her from the play? Looking at Masato's messages, Duya thought to himself, to put it bluntly. Then he glanced at Masato. He also understood his hidden meaning. Do you mean we should kill Kimura-san, right? He was suddenly startled when Kimura called his name. Hiragi-san. Kimura looked at him and asked, Hiragi-san, you like Night, don't you? After that question, Duya suddenly remembered the victims who had died at his hands. He thought, kill this person. Kill. When he received that question, Duya was silent and said nothing. Then he suddenly smiled and answered her. I don't know. Looking straight at Kimura, Duya said, I think he's very close. So, I want to face him more, to understand him. Looking in the rearview mirror, Duya decided, that's right, I can't agree, Masato-san, because remembering Sakuragi's case, Duya was certain of one thing. This is still different from Sakuragi-san's case. I still don't understand her well enough. Afterwards, he continued to chat with Kimura. A long while later, the car stopped at a red light. Meanwhile, Masato had also understood Duya's decision. He immediately replied, I see. However, please decide soon. No matter if Kimura was a good person or not, Masato remained firm in his own opinion. A person without conviction will easily crumble. In the car, Kimura and Hiragi were laughing and talking cheerfully, but at this moment, she was lost in her own thoughts. I often dreamed that He attentively started a conversation. I want to be able to switch between Night and Evan faster. But Kimura stared at Hiragi. It's all dreams of a beautiful past. Looking at that gently smiling face, she thought to herself, as if I'm constantly staring at the bottom of an empty glass. A pitiful escape. Hiragi continued, it's fast enough, right? I have to trust more, because those are the words of a fellow actor. At this moment, Kimura felt a hand reaching from behind. However, since the day Toba died, all my dreams have been shattered. A bloody head with a soulless pupil appeared, smiling hideously. Do you think you can escape? As soon as she saw that face, Kimura woke up from her dream with a look of terror. She couldn't hold back her nausea and rushed straight out of bed. Kimura hastily ran, knocking over pots and pans. She was in shock. She hastily opened the bathroom door and rushed inside. Afterwards, she vomited violently into the toilet. The scene changes to 5 days after Toba's disappearance. The mushroom-headed guy complained with his hands on his hips. I can't believe you dared to come back. The original lead actor of Intertwining Darkness, Toba, has now been replaced. Shiokawa, a member who had left the troupe, has now returned. Masato was seen grabbing someone by the collar. It's for Duya-kun, not for any of you. Kiryu-san brought him back, the one who was fed up with Toba and left. If he hadn't come back, Intertwining Darkness would surely have been canceled. At this moment, Shiokawa awkwardly bowed his head to everyone. Hiragi smiled lightly and went to chat with Kimura. Everyone's relieved you're back. Thanks to that, the atmosphere in the troupe has calmed down. Seeing his smiling face, she shyly looked down. From then on, the conversations between me and Hiragi-san became more and more frequent. Kimura watched Hiragi intently all the time and thought. However, every time I see him act, standing in the wings of the stage, she thought to herself, my eyes go dry. Looking at his reflected shadow, Kimura thought, a young man who seems approachable, but when he steps on stage, he becomes distant and blurry. Afterwards, she remembered the scene of Hiragi laughing and talking cheerfully with his colleagues. Gradually, everyone in the troupe came to acknowledge him. He's so dedicated that he doesn't even have time to sleep. Thinking of this, Kimura felt her own weakness and asked herself, and me? What have I been doing? She turned and left in silence, even though she had been here for many years. At this moment, a head peeked out from under the stairs. It was Toba's head, split in two at the top, with blood dripping down his eye, turning it red. Seeing it staring at her, Kimura turned pale and backed away in fear. Even outside of dreams, things are starting to fall apart. So obsessed with this horrifying scene, she hastily ran away. Kimura ran for her life outside without daring to look back. However, there was nothing under the stairs. It was just that she was too obsessed with the terrifying scene from before. The scene changes to 2 days before the premiere of Intertwining Darkness. Kimura stood in a corner looking at her phone. No news about a body being found. Seeing the good news. For a moment she felt relieved. Of course. How could, at this moment, a male colleague walked by and called. Kimura, he asked for a favor. Get the toolbox from the storage room for me. Hearing the word storage room, she immediately remembered the scene of Hiragi killing Toba. Kimura's face turned pale again. The colleague continued. Oh, and the hammer to the left of the door when you first enter. After hearing this, although she was scared, she didn't dare to refuse and thought, if I refuse, it will definitely be suspicious. Then replied, I got it. He immediately said, thanks. A while later in the storage room, everything here was strangely quiet, Kimura thought. I haven't been near this room since that day. With heavy steps, she slowly approached. Kimura cautiously reached her hand towards the door, feeling something from inside. I don't want to get close to it. And as expected, from inside, Toba's bloody head with his protruding and terrifying eyes peeked out. Seeing this, she couldn't stand it and felt nauseous, hastily running away. Hiragi discovered her from behind and called out loudly, Kimura-san, are you okay? Afterwards, he came closer and offered a handkerchief to Kimura. Hiragi sat down next to her, gently calming her down. Are you calm now? Seeing she was still not over her shock, he placed the handkerchief in Kimura's hand. Can you hold this for me? I need to clean up a bit. With that, Hiragi stood up and left. Kimura watched him go and thought to herself, this is bad. Everything. Afterwards, in a weak voice, she spoke up. I'm sorry, I should have cleaned. He immediately cut her off. Just rest. I'm fine, I'm used to it. Hearing this word, Kimura wondered. Used to it? Hiragi replied with a casual expression. Well, how do I say it? He scratched his head and said with a forced laugh, I have a girlfriend who's a heavy drinker. Hearing this, she suddenly widened her eyes and froze. Hiragi embarrassedly reminded her, this is a secret. I'm only telling you. Kimura-san. At this moment, she lowered her face and thought silently. Even though he's shouldering so much that I don't have. Afterwards, she asked, how can he always maintain such a calm expression? I was already mentally prepared, huddled in a corner. Kimura's psyche gradually became distorted. Do I lack determination as well? Hiragi said, if there's ever a time you can't stand it anymore, tell me. Hearing this, she was silent, her face showing a hard-to-read expression. So what am I? At this moment, the owl's eyes were watching them, creating a creepy feeling. He reminded her, anyway, go home and rest today. You haven't been looking well lately. A while later, Kimura had changed and was heading home. On the way, she was lost in thought. He still takes care of me, even though he's doing so many things at once. Kimura walked while deep in thought. From the beginning, thinking of this, she suddenly stopped and looked down at her stomach. Afterwards, a crazy idea came to her head, and without hesitation, she walked straight into a pharmacy. It can't be. Very quickly, Kimura arrived home. A faint light shone from inside the apartment. In the dark and messy room, a notification sound was heard. Good evening. How are you today? If you're tired, don't push yourself tomorrow. On the table was a used pregnancy test, and on it were 2 very clear red lines, standing beside the bed. She was so obsessed. She imagined the scene of Toba putting his arm around her with a threatening tone. Do you want me to kill your child too? Afterwards, regaining her composure, she went to the table and picked up her phone, then slowly tapped on the message that had just arrived. After reading it, Kimura immediately sent a reply. Hiragi-san, tomorrow is the final performance of Phantom, right? He immediately replied, that's right, so I can't come to practice tomorrow. Seeing that message, she curled her lips into a devilish smile. Afterwards, she continued to send a message, come to my place early afternoon the day after tomorrow. Kimura didn't forget to add a provocative final sentence. I've prepared a celebration party. Very quickly, the appointed day arrived. Hiragi stood outside and rang the doorbell. Lives alone. No automatic lock on the door. So careless. Masato stood beside him, pushing up his glasses and said, "And she even invites people over on a performance day. So thoughtless." He laughed awkwardly and stammered, "Well, huh?" Seeing no one come out, Hiragi looked down and exclaimed, "The door is open." He gently opened the door and peeked inside, calling out, "Kimura-san, I'm coming in." And so, the two of them went in together. However, at this moment, Masato heard something. There's the sound of running water. Feeling something was wrong, Hiragi was suddenly startled. Feeling uneasy, he rushed inside. Hiragi ran so fast he even dropped his glasses. But that wasn't important. The most important thing now was Kimura. When he opened the door, what hit him was a bathtub full of blood, and her body, dressed in red, lying neatly inside. Masato approached and checked for a pulse with his ashen hands, but not as hoped. He lowered his face in disappointment. No pulse. Looking at the cold body, Masato declared, "Suicide. This is almost certain." He wiped his hands and walked outside. She deliberately let others discover her. What a strange celebration. Afterwards, he looked around and thought to himself, "Now what should I do?" At this moment, Masato noticed a suicide note on the table. Then he called out, "Duya-kun?" He was still sitting with his face buried in his knees in silence. He couldn't help but be curious and opened the letter. "I'll read it." Masato read it out loud clearly. "To Hiragi-san. I'm sorry." Without missing a sentence, he read, "There's a suicide note on the bed written by me. I confess to killing Toba." Hiragi listened in silence. "Please hand it over to the police. The investigation will surely begin, and the play will also be canceled." The next part of the letter was, "The play that he risked his life to complete. I will destroy it." While writing, her personality seemed to have been twisted. Her mouth curled into a grotesque smile. "He deserves it." Next was, "And Hiragi-san, I also want to leave a scar on you." At that time, she remembered her jealous moments and wrote, "You live too comfortably. If I don't do this, you'll forget me." Then she reminisced about the scene where the two of them chatted so well in the car. "I don't want that. I want to be forever etched in your memory." And the final part was, "Please throw this letter away. I'm sorry." Reading up to this point, Masato looked up and said, "She never considered the possibility that I would read this letter." Seeing him silent, he thought to himself, "I understand. When people are pushed to the brink, their perspective narrows." Afterwards, he remembered his own tragic past. "I was like that once." His mood gradually became gloomy. Masato reminded him, "Now let's get out of here." Hiragi immediately spoke up. "Kimura-san said to give it to the police." He immediately replied, "We can't get involved with the police." Masato was seen clenching the letter. "I'll take care of this suicide note as well," he said while rolling up his sleeves. "Someone will find her eventually. We'll wait until then." On this side, Hiragi still had his face down, silent for a long time. Masato exclaimed with regret, "So pitiful." But he replied, "So selfish, right?" Hiragi put his hands on his head and said silently, "Both Toba and Kimura-san dragged others into their mess, imposed unreasonable things on them, and then were killed or committed suicide. So then, at this point, he remembered Toba's drunken scene and declared, 'I will also allow myself to do what I want.'" Hearing this, Masato's eyes widened in astonishment. "Duya-kun, what are you planning to do?" he asked with confusion. "Duya-kun?" He didn't say anything. Hastily putting on his coat, "I'm going to pick some flowers." Masato immediately misunderstood and pointed to the toilet. "Pick flowers? Do you need to use the restroom?" Hiragi hastily shouted. "I'm going to find wildflowers." "We need another layer of disguise in case there are witnesses," he shouted in a panic. "What are you talking about?" He took a coat from Kimura's closet and said, "I'll create a scene as if I killed Kimura-san." Then Hiragi put on the coat. "I'll explain while I'm preparing." And in an instant, he had disguised himself as a woman, wearing a headset for convenient conversation. in the guise of a woman. Hiragi casually walked on the street. The plan will be like this. What do you think? On this side, Masato replied through the dialogue box. I temporarily understand both the task you requested and the meaning of picking flowers, but he had fully equipped himself and looked at Kimura's body on the ground. To be clear, this is insane. Masato sighed and said, let's stop this. Even if we do it for real, it won't accomplish anything. Hiragi immediately refuted. Yes, it will. A big reward. Hearing this, his face became serious again. We haven't released the flower detail to the media. It will be a trump card when Inohara-san pressures us later. He continued to explain the plan. If we handle Kimura-san's case like last time, then it can be considered a serial murder. Hiragi walked deeper into the forest while saying, so we can assert if we were the culprits. How would we kill Kimura-san? He was seen searching and discussing. Inohara-san suspects us, but he doesn't have enough evidence to convince the entire police force. If he did, we would have been arrested a long time ago. On this side, Masato was still listening intently. This is a preemptive move before they get any closer, but if we get caught, it's all over. Masato-san, Hiragi stroked a flower and said with certainty, I am an actor. Afterwards, he continued to discuss tactics. If the body is discovered, the play will be canceled. If we want to perform, today is the only chance. With a pleading tone, he said, please let me play Knight and Evan, faced with the current situation. Hiragi held up the flower vase. I'm begging you. On the other side, Masato was silent for a long time in thought. Afterwards, he pushed up his glasses as if he had thought things through. Then Masato reached for a cabinet door and asked, be honest with me. There's definitely another main reason, right? Hearing this question, Hiragi suddenly froze. You knew? He replied quickly. Of course I knew. How many years do you think we've been together? Afterwards, he suggested, tell me your true feelings on this side. Hiragi had also picked flowers. Suddenly, Masato said something strange. In the meantime, I'll prepare for the opening act. This made him curious. Opening act. Afterwards, he imagined a terrifying scene and asserted, you added flowers to the body, so the culprit was called Hanaya, the flower shop, online. But the content of the preparation this time is not that cute. The scene changes to the city police department. Inside, everyone was busy working. Suddenly someone called, Inohara-san. Hearing this, he turned around and asked, Inui, good work? What is it? He immediately replied, I just overheard something. Inui made a mysterious gesture, leaning in to whisper, actually, I've been keeping an eye on something since we left last time. Inohara vaguely remembered and replied, left? That day? You looked very deep in thought then. At this moment, Inui suddenly uttered a sentence that surprised him. We were talking about that actor, he asserted. So I was wondering if there was anything suspicious, and started gathering information on Hiragi. Inohara cracked his knuckles and asked, did you find anything? Inui replied quickly, there are 2 missing people related to Hiragi. Hearing this, he frowned. 2 people? With a serious expression, he recounted. I'm investigating a female employee who used to work at Hiragi's management company, but a play Hiragi is in is about to start, and an actor related to it has also gone missing. Hearing this, Inohara said, it's not about to start, it's performing today. Inui praised him with admiration. Oh, you're quick with the news, he replied nonchalantly. Well, there are a few different reasons, he immediately exclaimed. I'm starting to get quite interested. At this moment, a message arrived. Are you free tonight? The next content was, I have tickets for Duya's new play. So, want to go with me? I want you to be my bodyguard. After reading it, Inohara was deep in thought, his face scowling as he muttered, indeed, this is very tempting. After reading the message, the 2 quickly met. Inohara spoke up first. Can I really be your bodyguard? Don't you have a closer friend than me? That person replied. It's fine, it's fine. Midori walked beside him excitedly and asked, by the way, how's work lately? Inaki. Hearing this, He was silent for a moment. Afterwards, he asked back, "How's Sakurai-san been lately?" "I haven't seen her since that day," she replied. "Same as always. Nothing's changed." Inohara asked further, "Is it just busy or because of work?" Midori took out her phone, tapped it, and said, "Of course, that's part of the problem. But afterwards?" She put her phone in her pocket. "It's Duya's mother. She's been in the hospital for a long time with a serious illness," she recounted with a sad expression. "But recently, the surgery she was waiting for has finally been scheduled." Midori walked while saying, "So now he's working even harder." Hearing this, Inohara frowned and muttered seriously, "His mother..." Afterwards, he turned to ask with curiosity, "And that puts pressure on him?" She waved her hand and explained, "Not really, for him. Acting is a passion, not a burden." Midori remembered the scene of herself watching Hiragi work until she fell asleep and asserted, "Duya's acting isn't for his mother." But a second later, she wasn't sure and exclaimed, "Maybe?" The scene changes to Hiragi Duya's dressing room. Masato knocked on the door and called, "Duya-kun, I'm coming in." The very next second, he opened the door and went in. But when he saw the scene around him, he was shocked. He was seen sitting on the table with a weary and lifeless face. "Welcome back, Masato-san. What a relief that you're back," Hiragi slowly exclaimed. "If anyone checks, we're done for," Masato replied. "Yeah, it's tense, but more importantly, are you okay?" He came closer, asking with worry. "You look exhausted," he replied with a silly smile. "I'm fine." Afterwards, he recounted, "It's just that my shoulders are a bit sore from all the cleaning. Compared to you, this is nothing." Masato remembered when he was given his task, arranging the body. Next was to handle it carefully, handling the procedures with the funeral home. Both were completed. Now all that's left is to pray for luck. Hiragi remembered the bag and said, "I've already left Kimura-san's bag in the dressing room." Afterwards, there was an image of him working frantically without rest. The costume was also finished being altered. Next was to go over the plan once more. The travel route has been analyzed. Now all that's left is for me to go on stage. Hiragi wearily tapped his phone and said, "That's it." After hearing it, Masato silently observed. At this moment, he held up his phone to show him something. It was a message conversation with Midori. "I have tickets for the show during the day. I'll go with my bodyguard in Noki." Afterwards, he concluded, "That detective will be at the show today." Hearing this, Masato's expression became more serious. "Is Midori serious?" He sat back on the chair and replied casually, "I really don't want Inohara-san to come." Remembering that face, Hiragi was a little hesitant. That guy can see through our tricks. He sighed and said wearily, "The fact that I'm playing both Knight and Evan means I'll be exposing all my acting abilities, my limits, and everything in front of that guy." At this, Hiragi jumped up. "There's not much time left to hesitate. Masato-san, I'll go over the travel route." He immediately replied, "Yeah, let's go." A while later, he attentively recounted to Masato, "If we move like this, no one will notice. It's lucky this old theater doesn't have security cameras." Afterwards, he handed the paper to him. "I've marked the positions of the troop members on the floor plan, so if anything happens, use that version." Masato reached out to take it. "Got it." At this moment, Hiragi suddenly became silent, staring at Masato seriously. Afterwards, he bowed his head deeply. "I'm truly sorry for dragging you into this," he said. "I know it's selfish, but..." However, before he could finish, he cut him off. "Duya-kun," Masato said with a solemn tone, "I can't stand it, so I'll be direct." He looked at Hiragi with a look of annoyance. "You have no charm right now." Hearing this, he didn't understand what was going on and let out a bewildered, "Huh?" Masato pushed up his glasses, looking mysterious. "Right now, you're a burden to Ryukoi Suzusa, even worse than an outsider." At this sentence, Hiragi fell silent and let out a deep sigh. He remembered his earlier words and judged, "Don't want Inohara-san to come? Afraid of exposing your acting abilities? Who do you think you are?" At this, Masato flew into a rage and shouted, "Don't be picky with your audience." He asked loudly, "What are you acting for?" Hearing this question, Hiragi's mind was cleared and he opened his eyes wide. Afterwards, he took a deep breath and stammered, In this moment, he remembered his meeting with Inohara. Then Hiragi was lost in thought. My reason. Afterwards, he remembered his conversation with Kimura and the suicide note. Next were a series of memories of interacting with people that flashed through Hiragi's mind. It is, after a while, a headache hit. He put his hand on his head. Afterwards, he knelt on the ground, looking very distressed. Seeing this, Masato panicked and awkwardly said, well, he was flustered, not knowing what to do. I'm sorry, I might have been a bit too harsh. But at this moment, Hiragi called out, Masato-san. He sincerely uttered each sentence, which surprised him. Thank you. I'm sober now. Hiragi asked himself and then said, just getting carried away by a short-term goal? How pathetic. At this time, outside, a large crowd had gathered. He took his hands away, his gaze gradually becoming determined. I take back what I said earlier. At this moment, he was like a different person. He laughed grotesquely and declared, I swear I'll give it my all. Seeing this side of Hiragi, Masato's mood lightened and he sighed in relief. Afterwards, he actively extended his hand. Give me your hand. However, he stood up on his own and replied, It's okay. A second later, he resolutely turned and walked away. When the curtain closes, make sure both your hands are free. He opened the curtain with determination, because I will win your applause. Outside, people were gradually revealed through the curtain. The scene became clearer and clearer, showing many people standing around chatting. A large and lively crowd gathered. The legendary night. It was almost time to start. The guests were all seated and chatting happily. After that, intertwined darkness was called that way. On this side, Inohara and Midori were also seated. This was necessitated by the fact that this performance was only for one night. The rows of seats were quickly filled. The lights on the ceiling were also turned on, but there were also many other reasons. The legendary night. The biggest reason among them was, at this moment, Hiragi suddenly fell to the ground with a thud. Masato ran over, calling loudly, Duya-kun! This scene attracted everyone's attention. Blood flowed from his body unceasingly. He shouted loudly, Answer me!